I'm going to call the November 27th, 2017 Issaquah City Council Committee work session to order. Tonight is one in a series of our budget work sessions. And I think the first, that there were questions posed last time, and we received answers. And if my fellow council members agree, would you like to go over new responses?
I think we're ready. You want to start at the top?
Of course. Go ahead. So we are working off page 5 of the packet, right?
That's correct.
And the first question was from Mary Lou about traffic revenue.
It was just to understand the proportion of ticket revenue that was related to traffic, and it was answered in the question, and I had no additional questions with the answer in the packet.
Okay. The next question, the next several questions are all Mary Lou's.
Okay. I forget which ones are mine.
Are we doing trail work within the next 5 years, and if so, what is it? What is the $7 million?
I think both Tola and I asked this question. Tola's is further down, and I think that I'm fine with the explanation, except that I still don't know what it is. So it talks about an I-90 trail. And I guess that's okay, but we can talk about it maybe at capital, next time we do capital improvement. But
Sure. I'm sorry, it didn't get updated. We did confirm that my assumption last time was correct. It's the trail that runs behind Pickering can provide some connectivity with existing trail out toward the state park, running somewhat parallel to I-90. It's been in the capital plan for a while, but I will tell you we've had ongoing conversations for multiple years about whether or not that's still an asset that's desired. It was first perhaps identified in the walk and roll plan, and it follows what we call TRIB 0170.
that's fine for me. I don't know if Tola wants to jump in if that, because we both have.
Okay. The next question is regarding updating a spreadsheet with 2018 data per capita detailed by department. Yep, that's Tola's.
That would be the mother of all spreadsheets. That's the acronym up there. So I really appreciate getting this information. It continues to show that our overall expenditures per capita in real dollars has gone down over a pretty decent time interval from 2009 till the projection for 2018. I will say that revenues have gone down faster than expenses have gone down. So there is a little bit of that mismatch, but put at what is the cost to residents of their municipal administration? That's gone down in real dollars per person, which is nice. And there were a couple of specific areas in here that grew, but most of them I think are I understand well. Municipal court, we understand why those increases have occurred. City clerk records has been in response to, or proposed for 2018 is in response to changes at the state legislature in reporting. Building permits and plan review is function of the city we live in. And then the one that catches my eye that there will be, I think, information further on is parks planning and administration, right? And that comes under that administration or operate. Is that related to the operations question that I had for later? That shows up later in the document?
It may be.
You've got it listed under economic development. I don't think that's, I think that indent is wrong. You've got a line item for, and it's not a trivial amount. It's projected to be $1 million in 2018. It's about 3/4 of the way down, and it's got a 16% increase from 2009 till now in real dollars per capita.
Are you looking at the detail,
The
Councilmember?
Moab, or MOAS, the
Okay,
MOAS.
let me pull that up.
There we go.
There we go.
If you scroll down, so under economic development, it's got an indent for park planning and administration.
Okay,
That one has grown, that's the only one of the line items that has grown, has outpaced inflation that I don't understand why it's outpaced inflation. Scroll all the way over, keep going, keep
here?
going.
Yep,
There.
here we go.
Yep, so it's grown at 16.3% in real dollars per capita. Like I said, all the other bright red line items I understand.
Can't hear you. I'm going to have Jeff Watling, our Parks Director, come and address that.
Hi, Jeff Watling, Parks and Recreation Director. This could be dangerous. This is the first time I've seen this, but I do know within Park Planning and Administration, in the proposed 2018 budget, we have a new full-time position proposed. We took the Recreation Supervisor position held by Ross Hoover, and we're proposing that to come over for an additional park planner. So that would certainly add some new costs within that division.
So, and I get that, and as the city has grown, new positions have been necessary, but this particular line item has outpaced inflation and it outpaced the growth of the city in a way that, you know, most of these have not, or they've grown at more modest amounts, but this is one that it's interesting, and I just wondered if it was also, because I had that question last week about operations, both police operations and parks operations. They had both grown in absolute dollars 50% in, I think, 5 years. So I had that question, and I believe it's answered later on. Is this a related bucket of money?
It could be. Part of the reason that those administration line items have grown could be because of the information technology allocation, because you're seeing in one of those divisions, and that was the challenge from going to shifting and breaking out the budgets, because there have been a change in coding, there's fund accounting cleans up, things of that nature. So you have information technology costs that had not typically been aligned with both parks and police. One thing for Parks Administration also is the new implementation of the Perfect Mine application for rec programming and facility rentals. So that is part of it. It would be the same holds true for the police department.
Okay.
Other questions?
I said, okay.
Oh.
No,
I thought you said okay, as in you had another question, sorry. You want to ready to move on to the next question then?
yes.
Okay, thank you. This is a Mary Lou question. Wanted Parks Department to bring back a schedule to address covering 100% replacement cost, replacement of the turf program.
So I went through the answer and I looked at the table, and I guess I had just a question and an ask for Jen. When we get to deliberations, this is something I would like to deliberate. So to the list of questions that you put in the packet, I can't remember if this one got added. Did this one get added as a policy question?
I believe it was a policy question. We could refine the policy question, and we can go through those questions as well. This is a line item for the turf replacement of $140,000.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, if it's not on there, I'd like to make sure we put it on there, so we do discuss it deliberations. And I guess the ask would be that on the straw man, it show up with both options, meaning something in the comments that says, this recommends, this is 100%, you could reduce it to 70%, something like that, just so that we have that choice. Because we're not deliberating now, we're just doing Q&A, right? Okay.
Could I add to that question yours a little bit? Because if I remember right, the $140,000 was not the full rental income. It was a decided portion of that, and the other portion would go in operations. So saying that we have to raise fees to put more aside wouldn't be a true statement. We could just take some, not put some of that back in operations as well. And my concern also on the fees question is, as it was answered, was the concern if you raise fees too high, you'll decrease use and then your revenue actually goes down. Well, I question that statement when I see that, because part of the reason we put these fields in was demand was so high that fields are not available, that I don't see that as a demand going down because of fees in this case, when that's what sold a lot of this work, that there just aren't fields available. So that kind of bothered me as well. In other cases, that's a very true statement. In this case, I don't think it is. And then also that part of it being, that's one option. Also, the other option is less going to operations and from those fees. Thank you.
Okay. Ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah, the next one was just a policy question for me, is the funds we've set aside from speed cameras that could, actually, it's a little bit confusing question, but I think what I meant to say was that, were there any study recommendations that, out of studies that we've currently done, that we could use this revenue for? And it says it was to be added as a policy question, which I think Jen did, correct?
Okay.
On that policy question sheet?
We added one line item for parking enforcement.
Oh, I'm thinking of the potential policy questions that you had put in.
Well, that question, Q1840, says that the answer was to be added to policy questions.
Yeah, which was that document you made last time, Jen, called potential policy question for council consideration. Did it get added to that list?
Not added to that list, but
Okay.
certainly can add it.
I thought that's what that comment meant, that it would show up here and we would talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, number 41, what projects are we doing which use mitigation dollars? And you have a sheet?
Yeah, I was fine with that, Jen. I'm sure in my head now, I can understand where the capacity is in the parks projects, which was one of my bigger concerns. So I'm just I'm fine with the answer for this year. I'm wondering next year, I know this isn't the capital improvement plan, but if there are ways that we might want to sort and include some extra schedules so people could see, that might be helpful. That was really helpful to me. Thanks.
Very good.
And question 42, what projects are we doing with REIT dollars?
So I got the answer, Jen, that's great. What I don't know how to mesh together, and maybe you could help us tonight, is it lists the projects and how much of REIT is being used for them over the 5-year plan. But the question on the policy sheet says, is council comfortable with the amount of REIT they're using this year? Somehow I need something in there to help me answer that question. So now I see the projects, but I'm still not sure I know how to answer the question, if that makes sense. And I don't, Okay, so I see the projects and I see the policy question, but I don't have anything to decide. Are we looking at the number of projects? Do we think there's enough projects? Are we doing too many of them with READ? Are we using more READ than we used to? What part of our funding model is it? I don't have enough to say, looking at that list, just going to yes or no. We're using enough READ or we're using too much. And I don't know, maybe when we get to deliberations, other council members will have ideas on how to be able to answer that question, because I'm glad you put the question down. I'm not sure if I could answer it yet.
Okay, we can look at it based on
We get
a
to
number of those
Sure.
thoughts that you had.
Follow that up. Well, maybe this is a process question. So earlier in today's packet, just like the last meeting's packet, you had the policy questions. And I know we're going to do deliberations. When are we going to address the policy questions, or are we just going to weave them in?
I think that's what Jen had planned, there are the policy questions, and then there's the line item, the amounts that go with those policy questions.
That was the intent, was to address the list of deliberation items, and then if there was a policy question, that would be then blended into the conversation about, and perhaps help inform how the deliberation item is finalized.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so we'll talk more about the READ question. You provided the detail, but the policy question is on the table still.
Yes.
The next question is to see, Mary wanted to see calls for service with current positions, then estimated calls for service with 3 new positions, and would like to see the data graphically.
I have questions, Scott. So I wonder if we could actually walk through that, because I like all the new graphics. I'm not sure I completely understand the story yet.
So is this an actual presentation?
Well, yeah. This was one of the longer ones, and I'm just wondering if Scott can run us through so we're all clear on what we're looking at.
Yep.
Sure, Scott Beerbaum, Chief of Police. This comes from the presentation back in October 12th, I believe, of the presentation. Some of the data that's presented really answers that question that you had posed in the last budget meeting about what it looks like for calls for service per officer. It's about 2/3 of the way through that. One more, right there. So, hard to see on the screen, but in the packets, the blue line represents what the status quo is right now with the current staffing levels with our vacancies. If we were fully staffed, we'd be reducing calls for service per officer by approximately, you can see our 16 and then what our projected 17 numbers are. By about 75 into this year if we were fully staffed. And what that means is if we have everyone, and right now some of the positions we have vacant are one of our community resource officer positions that is associated with the grant that we applied for and received in 2015. One of our detectives, we're having a detective vacancy as well. That's the follow-up investigations, closing that out as well. The third remaining was going to be applied to patrol, but that would have been applied to one of the patrol squads. Wouldn't necessarily create that 24-hour coverage, 24/7 coverage that we need. It would just be on one of the squads to help outfit that patrol squad to respond for calls for service. So you could extrapolate that if we follow that trend. Also part of this presentation, we talked a little bit about, I know I've talked to council about vacancy rates, and we average about 3 to 4 vacancies a year over this last three years. By adding 3 positions, that would be able to help keep us on that, let's say the orange trend line by catching us up to that point. That's what if we add the 3 positions, we'd be staying on the orange level by being down 3 historically. Does that make sense?
Sort of. So if I look at the calls for service per officer is based on the fact that chronically there are 3 to 4 positions short, and so the calls for service in 2012 was 666, and now it's 902. If we didn't have 3 vacancies, in 2017, we still would have been at a pretty high level of 812 calls. So the 3 vacancies didn't really bring it down. It brought it down 10%. And 3 new officers is what percentage of our workforce? Like, what percentage of our workforce are we normally missing?
About 8%, I'd say, right
Okay,
now.
so
'Cause
that's the
currently,
8
if we
to
have
10 makes
37
sense.
and we're down 3 around
Okay.
there.
And then if we were to fill those and also have 3 new positions, then what does that do to calls for service?
Correct. Well, let me talk about those 3 positions that are proposed. 2 of them would be traffic officers, and what we're looking at is traffic officers do several functions. They are doing traffic enforcement, but they also would be responding to collisions. Presented to you guys back on October 9th when we talked about some of our traffic safety data. Collisions represent approximately, in a course of a year, around 800 to 900 collisions a year. So what we'd be doing is utilizing those traffic enforcement officers to help take away some of that responsibility from our patrol officers to help kind of create more proactive policing time for the patrol officers as well. Utilizing that traffic enforcement or traffic officers during those heavier call load time frames, which is more of the from 9 a.m. till about 11 o'clock at night. Overlapping during that time frame would help create more time frame for our patrol officers as well, reducing some of their call load. So they're all supporting one another. Third position would be another additional patrol officer. Long-term intended is to try and figure out how to overlap that patrol officer during the daytime hours during, again, the higher call load volumes.
So I think the line on here that I was asking for that I didn't get was if we were to add 3 positions, which is the ask, what would the average calls for service on the remaining non-traffic police officers be? Are we staying at 800? Are we getting to 700? And I wanted to see, what does fully staffed look like, meaning with the proposed new positions?
Correct. So if we added 3, we'd be on trend for between that 800 and 900 level as well, assuming that we keep on our trend of vacancies. So if we have 37 sworn from the chief on down, and we add 3, granted they're going to be more towards the patrol level, you will see 2 of them in traffic, 1 in patrol. So you would see a reduction or maintenance, anticipating growth of the city somewhere along the lines of in the 800s is what we're projecting.
One of the other aspects of this was that overall, with the 3 reduced positions over such a long period of time, citations went from 4,500 down to 1,500, 1,800, something like that. One of the things I was trying to understand is if we add 2 officers focused on traffic and we add 1 officer, whatever, for patrol, to see the data about who's giving out the tickets. Like, are we relying just on traffic officers to give tickets, which means if we added 2 more traffic officers, we still only get back to the number of citations that we used to do when everybody used to give out tickets, and still trying to understand what that does in terms of how many tickets are patrol officers giving out of the 1,800 versus the 1 traffic officer or the speed camera that we have. Are we truly going to get a higher level of traffic enforcement with the 3 additions?
That is the intent. However, it depends on calls for service within our community. So if we have emergency calls for service, those are going to take a priority over some of the traffic enforcement pieces. So it also depends on staffing. There's a lot of variables that contribute to that. If everything was to remain, let's say, as consistent as we've had in the past with the staffing issues, or let's say a vacancy rate of approximately 8 to 10%, then we would probably see an increase of traffic enforcement. but they're also going to be helping reduce some of the calls for service workload for patrol at the same time with that traffic enforcement. So you're not going to see them writing a couple of thousand citations individually. A traffic officer typically writes around, depending upon workload, 700 to 800 or up to 1,000 in the course of a year citations.
Okay. That's it for me.
Any other questions for Scott?
Oh, one more.
I just had a question regarding the three current vacancies, and on the chart, I was trying to find the chart that I was looking at. Two-part. Sorry. Basically, my question is in regard to the detective and the community service officer. Would they be also dealing with the same information regarding the academy wait time? I'm kind of looking at the time to hire or the field training. Do all of the? I'm assuming those are higher level positions.
No, they all receive the same basic training of the academy. So if we're hiring a new position, if we're not able to hire a lateral and we have to hire an entry level, yes, it would be the same time frame as your about the 13-month time frame to get them up and running.
I guess that was my question in terms of whether that would
Correct.
be a lateral or
and typically how we
something
fill
coming in.
those positions are from within. So if we already have officers, enough officers that are, we have our full allotment of 37 sworn staff, then one of them would be assigned to that position.
Okay.
Yes.
So then you would be dealing with another officer coming in that would be going through academy wait time. And
Right, new positions, yes.
Okay.
The proposed positions, yes, would either, if we were unable to hire lateral police officers, then we would be looking at entry level, and they would go through that same timeline, yes.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So Scott, on one of the slides, it's police admin intended outcomes. There's a talk about increasing capacity to manage third-party overtime program. So one question was, I don't know what that is.
Sure.
So just curious. And the second was, I thought one of our budget questions was to understand the percentage of the salary and wages budget that was currently regular time and overtime, and understand how the overtime one might change based on being fully staffed, meaning that there could be offsetting savings by being fully staffed that you'd realize by a reduced overtime budget.
Right.
And I didn't see that in here.
Got it. First part, the first part that you referenced was associated with the increase of the 0.25 FTE for our administrative assistant. The job duties for that position have increased for a lot of some of our HR components, internal HR components regarding training, accreditation standards, things like that. The other piece that in reference is managing third-party billing. So we bill out if we do overtime for third parties, like for certain events or the high school or other retailers, or through grant programs as well. So that's what that's in reference to. Now, the financial information that you are referring to about the overtime, one of those pieces in regards to overtime, our overtime budget is it's not broken out into defined categories related to case investigations or other community events. It's not broken out into those individual categories, and it's not tracking that yet.
I was more interested in just gross numbers, just the assumption of if you spend $1 million on salaries and $1.5 million on overtime, but you were to fill 3 vacancies and have the potential to fill 3 more, does the salary one line go up and does the overtime go down, and then what is the net? And I can send you an example. I know for EFR that's what we looked at in terms of approving what we would call overhire situations, where you add vacancies knowing that they're hard to fill. It was a real balancing act between you're adding more full-time employees, but based on current vacancy rates, your overtime rate went significantly down.
Right.
Overtime expense went significantly down.
Sure. In 2018, our proposed budget for, let's say, operations or patrol is approximately about $112,000. So that's less than an FTE's worth of
Overtime, so it's not a
Salary.
significant component of your
No.
salaries at all.
No. We try and do that, manage that as efficiently as possible regarding case investigations. But there is a component of that as well is community events such as Salmon Days and some of these other ones that have a bigger impact on that overtime budget as well.
So if we have 3 to 4 officers down all the time and we don't fill the positions in overtime, what does that mean? Does that mean that?
Well, we do fill them periodically with, and so I apologize if I'm misleading you. We do cover shifts for either sick, illness, or sometimes vacancies as well. We definitely try and keep a certain amount of staff on the street, 24 hours a day. So we do have some of that emergency overfill as well, besides just case investigation. So I apologize for if I was
Does that come out of
misleading
that 100 and some
you.
thousand?
It does, yes.
Okay.
This is a question for Scott, but it's also sort of a question for Jen. I'm going to use police as an example of this fundamental question that I have that I'm looking, I guess, under the impression that there had been a more detailed answer to this operating question in the city's response, but I don't see it. So let me go back to, we had a conversation in the last council meeting. There was a supplemental item on 2015 actuals, 2016 actuals, 2017 projecteds, 2018 proposed, and then it had percent changes. And the thing that really strikes me is we spend a lot of time talking about salaries, and the police have actually done a really good job of holding the line on salaries over that time. We've only had an 11.7% increase in salaries and benefits from 2015 actuals to 2018 proposed. But operating, my goodness, 68% increase, going from $1.3 million to $2.3 million. Fire has a much smaller increase. Developmental services, extremely large increase, 200% increase over that same time. Parks, smaller percentage, 36%, but over $1 million. And so it's this larger question of we bury ourselves in these details of staff and making sure that we grow at reasonable rates on staff, but then some of these other areas seem to be growing really, really rapidly in areas that we don't normally cover in the budget process. So sorry, I'm going to pick on you, Scott.
I'm here.
And ask you about this one, but if it's really a question for Jen, then that's okay also. But that was the gist of my question from 2 weeks ago, and I don't feel like I've gotten a good answer. Do you understand the nature of the question? And I don't think it's transferring of IT services, because the amounts are so large over this. The growth is so large over these timeframes.
I'm just pulling up the detailed budget line item just so that I can get you into more detail, because that's the only way to, I think, answer the question.
I can talk about the police one unless
If you want to start with the police officers and the associated costs with them.
Sure. In our response to that, the budget increasing to 2018, that's another question that gets asked a little bit later. We do have the operating costs are from 17 to 18 are increasing about 167%, and that's largely due to that $885,000 IT cost allocation increase. That's the biggest impact within the police department. That's what you're seeing, and that's across the. I think that'll be talked a little bit further, but that's really what the biggest increase is due to, is that IT cost allocation for our department. We also have a series of some of the attached associated costs with the new positions. There's capital outlay, or we'll call it that way, for uniforms, equipment, and to supply for those police officers as well. So that's the biggest piece of that. We also have a little bit of professional services increase as well, because of the hiring processes of hiring for doing the background investigations. That has a 40% increase in our professional services, although it's only about $12,000, but you add that plus another small capital outlay of 2 vehicles to replace some detective vehicles, and additional of a new program to be involved with the East Side crowd management, demonstration management team as well. So that has about a $28,000. You see an increase in our overall operations too for our corrections because of our increased need to house offenders at other local jails. That's a substantial increase as well. That's about 212% increase, but about $68,000 for housing at other jails that are high mental and medical health.
But I think I heard you said something like 800,000 of that $1 million increase is IT?
Yes.
So help me understand, Jennifer. I see under expenditure overview in the budget, IT's gone up from $1 million to 3.5 from 2017 amended to 2018 proposed. So IT is up, and then IT's got a big chunk that's out in the departments that's also way up. I don't understand. Like, I could see if IT was going down because you were taking IT expenses and you were shifting them out to departments, but if I don't really understand. I don't understand.
Well, the shift to the new IT Internal Service Fund brought to light some more transparency in the cost of our technology. So that included the personnel costs associated with IT. There was the $1 million that was in the general fund just in the IT department alone. But there was also additional costs that were in line items such as communications, in miscellaneous, in repair and maintenance, in a number of, some departments had a separate line item called software, some had software annual maintenance fees, and so all of our software applications were all over the place. So that was one of the ways to bring those in. Sometimes there was a department that was paying for an IT expense that should be spread over all departments and all funds, and so that's why you see this segregated into the internal the Internal Service Fund and then allocated by user. One of the things that had not been happening is that in some divisions, the cost of IT personnel to come and assist with their IT needs, that was just essentially being buried. The cost of IT also was in the fleet fund, where there's a dollar amount where they were allocated, and so part of our budget practices were to also bring that into the new internal service fund. And so that's why you don't see apples to oranges with regards to IT, because those costs were in and amongst a variety of different line items, of a variety of different funds, and so that's the reason why it doesn't help. We do have some detail. I'm going to stop talking because I see that you're confused.
Well, let me just clarify. Like, I could understand if costs were being shifted, right? If they had been out in the departments and you wanted to centralize them, or if they had been centralized and you wanted to shift them out to departments, then what you would see is you would see one set of expenditures go down while expenditures elsewhere went up, right, to net zero it. But IT expenditures are going from $1 million to 3.5 at the same time, while a bunch of IT expenditures are showing up. Also, large expenditures like 800,000 are showing up at police. So
that is the allocation to that department back. So in police, there were some line items that did go down that were completely zeroed out, but there is some new software applications. There's the identifying of the annual maintenance that's associated with that particular department. And so if the departments had made a request for new applications, then that would be showing up as a charge back to them. So they're still going to have a charge, and it may be large. It is just all in one line item where we can pinpoint the cost of information technology back to the department without having to dig through multiple line items. So there were some trade-offs. It's just difficult to see because they were so buried in the individual line items in departments and funds.
So what I'd like to suggest to be able to move on this evening is I would like to request, I wanted an answer to this operating question. It sounds like the operating question is largely carried in this, how we're handling the finances of IT. I would like to get a written answer that explains what are our total IT costs in 2018 and how are they carried both within IT as a line item within general fund and then IT as it's carried out in the departments.
The administration will provide the methodology work papers to show you exactly dollar for dollar where they go, what department, what fund, and the background for how it was determined to be spread across all the departments and funds. So we'll provide that for you.
I don't necessarily need to know the reasoning behind it as much. I just want to see the amounts and.
We will show you the spreadsheet.
I'd like to ask Tola a question. I thought I heard you say in your question, it sounded like you thought it looks like we were counting it twice, that there was an expense from each of the departments, which was the cost allocation, and then you also saw the expenditure on the IT budget as well. Were you asking that question?
I was saying that I thought if there was a shift, if they were either centralizing IT spend or distributing IT spend, I would expect to see, in either of those scenarios, I would expect to see a fund where expenditures went down and other funds where the IT expenditures went up. What I'm seeing is all the IT expenditures seem to be way up, so I want to understand that. Right? If you were, for instance, if you were distributing it out, if it was like, you know what, IT is being carried by all these departments and we want the departments to carry their fair share, then the central IT budget should go down because you farmed all that expense out to the departments. But it doesn't seem like, that doesn't seem like what the budget is showing because it's gone from $1 million to $3.5 million. On page, whatever. The budget, page 112.
Of what document?
The budget. That's the IT, that's the page for, I think that's the page for the IT budget.
Right.
113.
Yeah, 113. So there was no, my understanding is there was no line item in the past, or they were very sparse and inconsistent between departments. And some of the answers, so I've been looking at that. Some of this is provided in today's packet, then dollar amounts per department on what their cost allocation for IT was. So that's showing up, that's part of their operational number for 2018. And so that wasn't line item before, so that's an expense from whatever their revenue sources are. Many of them is the general fund. It goes over to the IT fund and as revenue, and then the IT department spends it. So there's a spend, there's a revenue, and there's a spend. That's a net spend.
Right. The other thing you didn't see before was any of the capital investments that were made. So Munis, all the ongoing programs for that, those were recorded in separate funds. Now we're charging those out based to all the departments based on their use of some of the more general financial systems as well as the personnel and some of those other items that we've charged out. It's not easy just to point to one area and say that's the area. What we have tried to do is consolidate it and then redistribute. But do you want us to get you a more contextual answer again?
I want to not stop this meeting with my questions. So I want a response. You guys know what my questions are. I'm happy to take this conversation offline. Obviously, other people are getting annoyed with my questions, so I'm going to stop and let you guys respond.
Okay. I'm with you.
We're not annoyed. The next question is, what is the Economic Development Recording Secretary Services for? That was mine. And it says that Economic Development has proposed a $5,000 line item for contract services for a recording secretary. For the commission meetings, $75 an hour. It's more efficient way to provide commission minutes than having city staff take minutes. So I'm wondering why just this commission? How do we do other commissions, just curiously?
Sure, we have a mixed bag right now. We have staff taking minutes on some, and in this case, and we even just a few others, we have a recording secretary that has been enlisted to do that work. And the hourly rate staff feels is a good cost, as they will have to go back to their desk the next day, finalize meeting minutes if they were to take them, and take away from their time at their desks where they could be doing other tasks. It is inconsistent. I've told the department director that this is just past practice that we've grown comfortable doing. We've had conversations with staff liaisons to various council committees or volunteer board and commissions, and have discussed the differences also in the content in the meeting minutes. There's what's minimally required by state law, and then some commissions go above and beyond that. That's been just the habit. If we were to do something more minimal, like state law requires across the board, then I don't see a need to have a recording secretary. I think we can record the pieces that minimally need to be recorded in that fashion. So in my mind, if, this is a small dollar item, but if council wishes, we could approach this differently.
So I have a lot of other questions, but I don't think it doesn't have to be done in a budget work session. If it were a much bigger dollar item, maybe I would, but it's not. So if anybody else has any questions on that one? Okay.
And what I can offer is that we'll continue to talk about it and look at different ways of doing it and creating more consistency.
Okay. Next one, Q45. This is Paul's question. A large part of changes in transfers out in general fund referred to Paul referred to page 38 for details. Across the board, of 14% growth without IT and other governmental services. Address the 14% growth question. Explain increase in operating expenses.
So thank you for the replies. I see that you did it by department. It was a little bit hard they weren't all normalized. There's a little bit of different style and a little bit of different information in each one of those. And I provided you the spreadsheet that I was using as well, where I did my calculation. And I had done it based upon actuals, not 2017 budget. So I noticed in all of your replies, you're comparing budget to budget. And what I was asking about was actuals to budget. So that makes it kind of hard for me to so I appreciate the detail. There's a lot there across all those pages, but it didn't get to all. So I'll just pick on one. So maybe it was executive, for example. Just to give you an example, let me find this in today's packet. In today's packet, I think that's on page, let me find that in a second.
34.
Thank you. And so just to point that out, so it talks about how the salaries increased by 96, operating costs increased by 90. And if you look at the proposed budget for executive, those are budget 2017 versus 2018 budget. And my question had been about the difference between actuals, because that percentage that I quoted was the difference between actual or forecasted actual 2017 and the 18 budget. And so it's kind of all over the place. In some areas, actual salaries expended was much lower than the budget. And then the answer to the question was why the budget to the budget was actually different. Without really, I didn't get to hear why the actuals were so low. It didn't really account for maybe why the spend was so much less. In other cases, the actual spend was higher than the amended budget, and you still only talked about the budget to budget. So I couldn't see.
So generally, we do budget to budget because it provides the most consistent framework. And the variance in actuals, you may have a personnel vacancy, step increases. You may have a contract or project that we funded for 1 year.
See, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, and I think so what we tried to do on a budget to budget basis was answer those. If you went on an actual to budget, then some of these things would still be the same, but some, there may be a slightly different story. But for the most part, if you look at the big changes, like on professional services or some of the projects that they were working on, those would be reflected in here. In some cases, projects maybe didn't get completed and they got carried over into the next year. Yep, or there may be budget amendments that actually increase the expenses because there's a mid-year budget adjustment. So the cleanest way to do it is a budget to budget comparison versus an actual to budget comparison.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I thought I had asked it the other way. That's why I presented you with the spreadsheet that had the calculations. So there's that. One of the, I'm not going to go into there's many pages and a lot of text with a lot of detail in there. One of the things I did do through that information is go through where it was provided, try to pull out what the numbers, if they were provided for the actual cost allocation for IT. So like Scott was saying earlier, it's right there in his page, 885,000 and change. And was just kind of was plugging those in, and that's where that was one of the things that highlights kind of how it was a little bit different. A fewer departments just gave a percentage rather than an actual amount, so I don't know what their cost allocation amount was, and some didn't mention it at all, so I don't know. Maybe they don't have any, maybe it's zero. And really, as much as anything, I just wanted to see how well the story ties out. Right? There's quite a bit in this year about cost allocation, but we've got it in a lot of different places. But what we didn't have before was, okay, here's what it was for every department. For IT, and I got some of it, which out of that document, today's packet, total up to $2.4 million. Which is 2/3 of the IT budget, but not all of it. So again, I was just looking to see how it tied out. How does it all, and I mean that kind of in the accounting sense. I added it up over here, I added up the story over here, I see if the difference is what you reported. I'm just trying to see if I can find the true story within the data. So I still have a gap. I can provide you more of what I've done. And really the purpose for this is this is a change. And do I understand it? You're asked us, it's an administrative change to cost allocation. I think it's a good idea. It's a very common practice. I know it's only our first one, and we're going to be doing more like finance, HR, shared services are going to come as well. But then this first time around, I can't actually see it in the numbers. I don't know if you can respond to that, but I'm telling you, that's my assessment of the reply that I got.
Well, I can't respond today, but I fully understand what you're asking for now. And so we have some categorization of some individual transactions so that we can pull that together. Some of the historical information is, as I indicated, in a number of different line items, and doesn't have a category code that we can quickly do that, but I'll work with John on how we can pull that information out so that you can see how those numbers were in the previous budgets, previous actuals, and then to connect those to the 2018 and then why the increase.
When is our next meeting scheduled?
Well, we had a poll. Do we have the results?
Basis.
I'm just curious how much.
Oh,
okay.
Not for us to all look at it.
Paul, can I ask you a question about your question?
Yeah.
So it was based off of page 112 and 113 in the budget.
Hold on.
And you were trying to piece together how the three, at the top of the page, how the $3.337 million line item how you could find the pieces that added up to 3.37 million, the cost allocation piece?
That was one of the objectives,
One of the
yes.
objectives.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the math didn't work out, and it sounds like you, because we're going from one system to another, you're trying to, it's different than Tola's question. You're trying to see what change that had? And I'm not sure I'm following why you backtracked on the 3.337. Like why you went to try and, what story does it tell?
So what isn't in the published budget is there is no one place that says, here's the dollar amount via cost allocation from every department that feeds into IT.
Into the 3.37.
That's right.
Okay, fair enough.
So there was that. But the other one too was because of page, and I think it was on page 38 of the original budget, where it was just this general fund summary. As I want to do sometimes, I'll take those numbers and put them in a spreadsheet and just look at it. And knowing that the 2017 costs for some departments, now this is just a one line per department, so it's got salaries, got operations, got professional services, it's all boiled up and it's all summed into one line for each of those departments. Knowing in 2017 it didn't have any, there was no cost allocation, but they did represent it in the 2018 numbers, it's in there somewhere. So that would certainly account for a large part of the operational cost, but I didn't know how much of the operational cost. And now if you said the operational is just one line, you'd go down to a little bit more detail. And then what else changed? And I specifically had asked for the difference between actuals and budget, not budget to budget. And I probably should have reiterated that just to make sure that wasn't missed, because I know oftentimes you report budget to budget. And so it just seemed to me, and this is just like an auditor doing some work, like, okay, we've got some new numbers here. We see a cost allocation total amount that's going to IT, but I don't see it at the department level. Okay, give it to me. Let me just see it. And then explain that change in operational costs. Scott got his, 885, right? But then there's other changes in there as well. What else has also changed? So that was the broader question, with the IT costs just being one that, okay, let me pull all that out and let me see if it, like again, a mindset like an auditor, I'm just looking in the numbers and just to see if it all ties out. And I wasn't able to do that with the information we were provided.
So, Paul, one of your questions in the IT budget is the technology services total 3.5 is the source of that, the sources of that. Is that one of your questions?
Yeah, my understanding comes from all of the departments, their
Okay.
cost allocation amount. And in today's packet, the replies add up to about 2.4 of that
Okay.
3.5.
Thanks. So the question about next meeting, we do have a last question. Let's talk about our last meeting after the last question. For the next meeting. Is there anything else on your question?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Question 46 was mine, and it was after the meeting. It was just over the holidays, actually. It was, what is the cost estimate for televising the remaining commissions that aren't already? And the answer was we have 13 other commissions that are not televised, and that they couldn't pull together a number quickly, which I understand. They needed to do some more analysis to determine what those costs would be. There are considerations about where those meetings couldn't necessarily be live. They'd have to be recorded, equipment, staffing, things like that. So I wanted to know what the cost would be so the council could potentially consider televising some or all of those meetings. So that's still an ask that I have for that information. Then it would be on the deliberations list. we have questions about that? Sure.
Yeah, I do. So one of those is LTAC, and we tend to meet in the middle or a little bit later in the afternoon, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock meeting. Never here. They're usually in a conference room over in City Hall Northwest. And I know the timing is about what general people's availability is kind of based upon that. So I know we haven't deliberated yet. I'm
Right.
just trying to understand.
Sure.
And I know why you're asking the question. Do you see that there would be a side to this where let's get every one of those commissions and boards to make changes as well to accommodate being recorded? Like be here, for example, because we have cameras already?
Not necessarily. I mean, there were opportunities. So the reason for my question is really about transparency. And I know that we have anecdotally a growing audience, growing number of people who not only watch meetings live, but then you can also watch them when you have time. And I watch them sometimes live and a lot of times recorded, and it's very, very helpful to listen myself, watch myself to see how the meetings went. So they wouldn't necessarily, I don't think all of them would have to be live, wouldn't have to be here. And if they weren't here, there would have to be equipment that would record them, then people can watch them on demand. But I hadn't gotten that far. I think it's envisioned that UVDC might be no more, so sometime next year. So that would free up one time slot here in council chambers, for example. But that's really all the further I've gotten in thinking about it. I just wanted to know what the cost would be.
So it's our intent to get you that, and it was a good suggestion. I think the challenge is this room is booked most of the time, so I think you kind of covered that in your answer. There's really 2 options. One is to buy mobile equipment, and then it's a recording, and then there's post-production impact to that. The other option is just to dedicate another room in the city and set up a permanent type structure that would be able to feed the meetings live. So it might mean the Eagle Room, but that would restrict some after-night activities where we currently either rent it out or give it out for, make it available for the public to use if we ended up putting in kind of a permanent installation. And we'll have that report for you for the next meeting.
We also have other rooms in the city, other city-owned buildings that probably aren't utilized in the evenings all the time. I can think of a few, but I don't want to throw them out there because I might be wrong, so. Any other questions on that? Okay, so Paul, you had asked about the next meeting, and there was a poll, and the 2 dates where the most folks can go would be December 2nd, which is a Saturday, and December 13th, which is a Wednesday. December 2nd, Mariah and Bill cannot go. December 13th, Tola cannot go. That's the results of the poll. We haven't scheduled anything yet. Okay.
Wasn't the 13th on the calendar from a long time ago? Seemed like I had it on my calendar
Was
for
it?
a long time ago, so it's been there. It's not a new date, I don't think.
Yeah, it was just confirmed.
It's my final picture meeting.
Okay.
Another option would be if you wanted to have the work session, which would be the second Monday, I think the 11th, and just dedicate it to the budget. We could do that as well if you needed a third.
Okay. All right, we'll have to talk about it. Okay. Okay. What's next?
Next, after the questions, I wanted to go through the list of deliberations. It's also referred to as budget highlights. There are line items of, I'm going to find it here quickly as I run 2 computers. All right. How does this look? Okay. This is a list of the draft items that had a dollar amount related to them. It was intended to be utilized as a list for council to either place an item on, pull an item off, or modify a number. You can see in the amount column. This list was created based on budget categories of revenues, staffing, initiative studies and preliminary design, maintenance and operations, and then the capital projects that are components of the capital budget. Last work session, the council started with discussions on these items. And as a reminder, there was one thumbs up, thumbs down with regards to, and it also related to a policy question about funding all of the unfunded projects that are included in the 2018 through 2022 capital improvement plan. As you can see here, this is the note, is that this item was removed and the council president would provide direction in the letter for the budget. So the next steps would be to, the administration is asking for the continued conversation about these items. Certainly items, like I said, can be added, deleted, or modified.
Regarding the debt funding, the question we answered, I thought a little bit more about this. Basically, we all know that there's a CIP, there's a certain portion of it that's not funded. And the question was, you want to go project by project or maybe find some way to handle the whole unfunded portion? I went and took a look at, I wanted to see what other cities were doing. Fascinatingly, Bellevue actually has a portal for their operational and their capital budgets. And when I was looking at their capital budget, I noticed that some projects, like in a later year, like as early as the second year out, but some of them maybe a third or fourth year out, weren't funded yet. And I began again to realize, there might be other options. We're asking this question two ways, but there might be other ways to consider it. And maybe not in this budget meeting any further. I think when we're talking about, funding the unfunded portion of the capital plan, it just seems like, at least in the little bit of research that I did, it seems like there may be some other approaches. And it seemed like Bellevue, for example, was one of them, where they maybe just did some number of years, or they took some categories and maybe did all of it, the projects in that category, and other categories, they just did some number of years. It just seems to me there may be, I'm wondering if there aren't other options that we have to look at for funding the capital, the unfunded portion of the capital. Thank you.
How would you like to work on this?
If you wanted to, if there was any particular place in the list that you would want to start, any category, that is open for council's thoughts on that.
Questions first?
Yeah, Jen, just a question on the structure of the list. So normally what we do if we are removing or adding a cost and it has an associated revenue with it, we can see both. But just a quick look at the list on the recreation ones, the new after-school program at community center has a cost, and the Sunday opening of the operation of the community service has a cost. Are those just the expenses associated? That is the net expense, revenue minus expense?
Nope. In terms of governmental accounting, we don't use net. And so you'll see here in the revenue category, you can see that the new revenues identified for additional lunch services, additional transportation services, after-school program, Sunday operation of the community service have a level of revenue. This is the dollar amount that is anticipated. Down below then in the maintenance and operations category, you can see those same line items, and this is the expenditure side of it. So, for example, if the additional lunch services were to be taken out of the budget, we would take out that $62,000, but we would also take out this revenue for additional lunches of $18,720. So they are connected if there is a matching revenue. And matching, I don't mean dollar for dollar.
No. I mean, is it a difficult sort for us to see the net? Because I think one of our policy questions will be, if we're going to add a service and it has a fee, do we want, what percentage of the fee should cover the cost of the service? So when they're listed separate, is it possible to show them in a way where if it's program expense, program cost, we can see a net?
There was additional information that was provided in work session packets where the Park and Recreation Department provided a pro forma that showed these revenue amounts with the associated expenditures, and I can pull that up here if I can have a couple of minutes.
I think maybe when we are actually deliberating an item, it might be helpful to see the pro forma.
I'll pull that up.
Okay, do I have any preferences for how you want to proceed? So we can sort this? I think she can sort. Is this on-
I'm going to
is
pull
this
up the
a PDF?
spreadsheet because this is the agenda packet, so it's a little bit better to use a actual living document.
Or you can start on page 4 with policy, and when we ask a policy question, then we can go over to the spreadsheet and look at the specific lines that are related to that question.
However you want to put it up.
Like starting with the policy questions, and then if we don't cover everything we need in there, then we do the additional line items outside of it.
I like the policy questions.
Okay. Policy question?
Policy questions?
1. Didn't we already answer this one? Yes, we did. We did this one already.
All right.
Okay.
Policy questions are starting on page 4 of the agenda packet.
1 we dealt with, right? 1 we did?
Number 1 we dealt with, and we dealt with this line item here about debt funding for all unfunded CIP projects. That one was removed. The debt funding source for the Providence Point project was something that perhaps you would want to have a discussion now about that, because that was an estimated $375,000 in a debt service obligation.
So Jen, I think this was the one that really surprised me, like in a good way. Last time you mentioned it, because this is it's the first time I've been on council where we might be funding a project using councilmanic bonds. Is that correct?
I'm not sure of the history about the choices on making councilmanic debt, but there has been some debt that's paid out of specifically the general fund, and so the administrator could help with that historical question.
Yeah, so we haven't issued any councilmanic debt since I've arrived in 2010. We've done some general revenue bonds, we've done some refunding that may have had some councilmanic. That was originally councilmanic, remained that, but we haven't done anything new.
Okay. I thought that was a really big deal. I was actually glad to see that after the transportation bond did not pass, that we were exploring other options of funding at least some of those projects that were on that bond. So I was very much in support of that.
And just a reminder, the green highlights, there are 2 green highlights, one of them that was removed, but this one is not included in the budget. So this would be an addition to the general fund that would reduce the budgeted increase in ending fund balance. And so that would be the impact.
Okay, and so as a reminder, whoever happens to have this at their fingertips, and I do not, what is project TR-031?
TR-31 is the Providence Point intersection improvement.
Not the whole thing.
It's the financing.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, that 375 is the financing, so it's about $7 million for the
That
overall
fund is-
project.
okay.
So this is the estimated principal and interest payment that we would likely see. If we issued debt early in 2018, we'd make an end-of-the-year payment.
Thank you for. Tola?
So when last we talked about this, there was a discussion about whether you do it councilmatic, whether it goes out to the public as, there were a couple different options, right? One was a sales tax kind of option, and one was a property tax kind of option. I didn't remember there being a third option of just putting it on to the general fund, but that was always an option that we just didn't discuss so much, because at services, we spent some time talking about the other two options.
Yeah, so that wasn't our recommendation, because that means we've got to come up with $375,000 every year for the next 20 years out of the general fund to pay for this project. And then there's a question of relative importance. So if you're going to spend $400,000, approximately $375 a year on debt service and spend $7 million, is that where you'd want to spend? Are you getting the biggest bang for your dollars there, or would the council want to spend it somewhere else? So that was part of the conversation. So our recommendation was to do a TBD, try to share the cost across a broader tax base, because you've got people who live in the community that generate revenue for that, and then outside the community that would generate revenue for that as well.
So is it just that and then of course the other option was an option that, because that would have been a sales tax.
Right.
And so there was another option that was effectively a property tax, right, which was, that was
So that was like the
bond.
bond, yeah. So that needed the 60% vote, and there was only just under 55%. So majority voted, just didn't hit that 60% bar. So you could do a TBD. You could go, which was one of the option that we recommended. You could just do general bond issuance. You could do a LID. And charge for the benefit of that project, or maybe you do a partial LID and partial general fund funding. So there's a lot of options depending on where the council wants to go. So I think we were trying to get through the TBD discussion, and if the council just said that's not an alternative, then I think we'd come back with a variety of different, but this scenario is, if you want to put something in the budget that gives us direction, then we could come back maybe by the first quarter and give you alternative methods if the TBD piece isn't going to work. Because we still have, the other one that's out there is the pinch point that is going to probably end up being several $1 million. And as we've said a few times, there's no revenue for transportation or for capital in the budget. So we're suggesting that you not look at this project in isolation, but be cognizant of all the other impacts too.
So this is an interim, this is a bridge until we can have the more comprehensive conversation. Because I think, because one of the concerns that I have is that anything that is a sales tax, on the one hand, it gets to the folks who come into our community to do business, but on the other hand, it's a sales tax. And I hate sales taxes. They're the most regressive, other than a head tax, right? Other than just putting a fee on every single per capita of every single person in the city, it's the most regressive tax you can have, right? As opposed to a property tax, which is around here as progressive as we can get, thanks to our state constitution, as our state Supreme Court just reaffirmed. So that's my concern down the road, and so I'm just, I suppose, putting it onto general fund, then it's effectively you're taxing at the smorgasbord of ways that we fund the general fund, which is sort of a mix between the two extremes from a progressiveness standpoint.
Right.
Bill?
Yeah, so I might have missed a little of the conversation, but the last I saw watching the last meeting was that I thought this was a 2019 project, and in 18 we were going to do all the prep work, the last, updates of the plan and so forth, and that was for a smaller amount of $100,000 or something of that nature, and then looking at a 19 actual construction. So this is different where you're saying this is an actual construction in 18, immediately go out and start working on this and make that decision now that we're going to fund that somehow, not knowing how yet, but just saying we're going to take on that debt for 20 years at some point. Is that the real question right here, starting right here and now? I want to clarify the question because that's where I wasn't from previous discussions.
So I don't think the intent is to change the construction schedule. It's just to get the financing in order to do the construction 2019. So it's not to change the construction timing at all. Still 2019.
Okay, so why would we start paying debt service in 18 if we're not construction in 19? Because the 100,000, I think we could find somewhere to get it ready, but actual expenditure of dollars would be in 19. So I don't see something needed in 18. We'd have all of 18 to get that funding in place for 19.
That's probably a Jen question.
It depends. As the city administrator indicated, that working out the mechanics of a bond issue, it would depend on, because we do have dollars in the budget for the remainder of the design work, but also if we wanted to start paying on that debt and start that project earlier on in 2019, we could perhaps do that with a placeholder of some dollars towards the principal and interest.
Okay, so that's a different question than we had before in my mind, but it's okay. That's the clarifying. Then the question is clarified. Is this is an ongoing start construction in first quarter of 19 and the funding's in place and we're accepting the debt on that. That's what this question is right here.
And I think I heard you say, Bob, that even though this says ongoing, could you change this later if there was a TBD in place?
Yeah, so if you ended up doing a TBD, so the biggest thing is if you go out and issue the bond, you've made a commitment to pay for that on the city's good faith. And so if, say, a TBD happened say you paid general fund for 3 years and TBD happened in 2020, and then you decided to commit those funds to pay for that, I think you could probably do that. I don't have a lot of information on the TBD law, but I think you could probably do that as long as it's on the schedule. So you do have some options there. I think the question you asked on the issuance, so you have, when you do a bond issuance, you have a fixed cost. So you got some legal fees, and then you've got the fees of issuance and those types of things. And then the question would be, are those fees greater than what those fixed costs greater than what the interest would be for that period of time before you did it? So if you did an issuance next year, and we could do an issuance in 19, your fixed costs are generally going to be around the same. So the question is, would that 1 year of interest of that principal amount be greater than doing a separate issuance for that at some point later? And usually get better rates if we can issue a larger note than a smaller note, because you get institutional buyers that will buy it. If it's a small note, like a 7, that might end up being like a bank qualified. You might, although they don't tend to go 20 years, but it might be, I suppose.
Some banks are starting to go 20 years, but the larger the issue, the better the interest rate you're going to get.
So I think what Jen said is it depends based on what that full scope of debt issuance would be.
So I think this highlights exactly the point I made earlier, because a TBD, so we have things in the CIP which are not transportation related. Mm-hmm. The T in the TBD is transportation. And that's where that really is not, the TBD was never the answer to the second question up there, fund all the unfunded portion of the capital. It was fund some portion of the unfunded transportation related projects. And so that's in between. To me, that's in between project by project versus fund it all, or TBD, which can take care of a slice of this. Yeah, I think, I would really like to have that TBD question all the way down to having a vote on the question. Because, I mean, that would be the question that I would like, the policy I'd like to have us have is do a TBD or for this others in this time frame for this amount for these projects and fund it this way and a vote of the people, or do project by project, consulmatic bonds, the interest comes out of the general fund. That's the conversation I'd like to have with the council.
Did that get referred from infrastructure to a certain date? No. 11th?
Let's ask him.
Okay, I can't remember.
And, yeah, so kind of an update from, Paul and Mary Lou were there at infrastructure. The TPD discussion has been forwarded from, it was an infrastructure committee question, and we didn't have it on the agenda at our meeting in November. I was thinking that we'd do it in December, letting all this budget talk and moratorium work and all the stuff we're having to do now and let that, sit a little bit rather than jamming one more thing in before the end of the year. But the last infrastructure meeting is after the last council meeting of the month because of the first being on Friday in December. So if we just left it on the infrastructure, I'm going into some detail here, sorry, I digress, but it's important. So if we left it on that date, then it would automatically roll in January. So we had a quick discussion on infrastructure, and Paul and Mary Lou and the administration wanted to have a discussion in December with the council as a whole. So we talked about bringing it to one of the budget work sessions prior to our third council meeting of the year. And I think we were looking at the Monday in between the two council meetings. I think it's the 10th, 11th. Okay, so the 11th. And so bring it to the council as a whole in a work session to have a discussion and have them, if we can technically, refer it to the last council meeting of the month on the then 18th, and where the council could have a full discussion on it during this year. And then they can look at, as a whole, whether they need to act on it in December or roll it into January and continue the conversations, as you were talking about, Paul, because there's quite a bit of discussion to have, and I don't know how much time we have in December to have those in-depth discussions. So the answer is the 11th is when we're supposed to talk about it here in a work session, and then the 18th at a council meeting, if a decision wants to be made by the 18th. If not, it'll roll into January. Am I clear on what happened there? For those that weren't at the meeting?
Technically, it gets referred back to the council with a recommendation to refer it to a work session. That's what happens.
Yes.
Yeah. So it'll come to the council before the 11th, and then the council will
The 4th.
decide. Paul?
Yeah, I would like for us to defer the question this evening on the first one up there about the Providence Point project until we could have that comprehensive question that also include the other alternative funding, which was the DBD.
Question, and then I guess technically we would ask council members if they want to defer or not, and then if they don't, then we take a vote. If they do, we wait. I would think.
Yeah, and okay, and that would be my reasoning, and I think, yeah, there's my reasoning.
Okay, Mary Lou?
Well, if we're going to do a thumbs up, thumbs down, I'll just do that.
I think I have a question first. So on the last page, we also have under the under budget highlights, we also have Providence Point intersection under the street capital fund for $150,000. So I just wanted to understand what that, get an explanation for that as well.
That's the remainder of the design work for the project.
Okay.
So, Paul, can you explain in one sentence why you would want to defer this. And the reason I'm asking is, if we didn't talk about TBD until mid-December, then it seems like we're jamming up some things for final budget preparation. I don't know. At this point, I would be in favor of including it. And then if we changed our mind next year and didn't, anyway, that's just my thought. I'm curious.
I think that the topic of transportation funding is critical enough, and having a good council debate and vote on something more comprehensive than a single project, I think is a really good use of our time. Of course, I have no idea which way that would go, because especially if it was a sales tax, there'd also have to be a vote of the people. But it's a much more comprehensive conversation than just a single project. And I don't think that the net timing would be any different for this particular project, and that's why.
Okay.
I don't think it affects the timing of the project.
So I'd be interested in knowing what other council members think before we just take a vote up or down.
I have a question about how it plays out. So if we decide, if we say, okay, we're going to vote on line item 7, and we give it a thumbs up, we say, okay, we're doing that, and then when do we address number 8, which is also when we address number 7 if we give it a thumbs down, right? Are we trying to address line item 8 this year still, in December?
So council, so what we got was a commitment that the council president's letter, the transmittal letter, would direct the administration and the city council to tackle this issue in 2018.
In 2018,
Yes.
okay. Because I wasn't sure what I was hearing, because we're certainly not ready to do the holistic in the next 34 days, right? Like we have between the moratorium and getting a budget out. So either way, if we say yay or nay, we're not trying to get all that done this year.
Right.
Okay. We're just saying that we want to wait to decide the Providence. If we said nay, it's that the Providence Point piece, we want to wait and make that part of that larger conversation that occurs in 2018?
No, Paul was suggesting we defer that decision on number 7 until after the council has an opportunity to talk about TBD, potentially at a work session on the 11th, which if we do, can't be slated for the budget.
And the TBD is not line number 8.
Right.
Right.
No, I heard you say that. I'm nervous about trying to discussing a transportation benefit district in 2017 still. Are we going to decide that?
There's actually a 2-step process for a TBD. One is, I'll call it the administrative process of actually just establishing the entity, the legal entity that is a TBD. It's then a second process for the board of that district to decide what type of funding mechanism they would use. And if then we would choose, to say sales tax was the one, then there's that whole take it out to the vote type of thing. By having do we want to set one up or not, and having a good conversation about what kind of projects it might fund, getting that started now gives us a chance to actually have a vote in 2018, a vote of the people.
Okay.
Can I weigh in, Tola? So I see them as sort of 3 separate questions. So the first one, just talking about Providence Point, it's just, I'm actually in favor of a thumbs up, just say it, to the Providence Point. We've committed to doing it in 2019. It's a $7 million project. We already, under our financial model, had several mechanisms to pay for it. If we adopt a TBD, separate question, we might change it. But I'm in favor of just saying, we're doing that project, doing it in 2019. Let's make sure we have the financing in place so that we don't have a silly reason at the end of the year to say we can't do it. The second one, I thought it was awesome that Jen brought that to the forefront again, that every year we should be talking about our long-term funding issues too. So the three of us got to sit on an ad hoc, which was great, but we've never gone through the council exercise of looking at all those funding mechanisms to decide. So I'm glad she put it up there to highlight again that we still haven't answered that question, which is one of our responsibilities. But I'm fine with taking it off for this year. The TBD is different. It's not part of the budget. It's just like a new funding tool, and I agree with Paul. We should have the discussion, decide if we want to have the tool. That's not a commitment to use it. It's not a commitment to use it on anything. It's just saying it's another tool we're going to put in the toolbox, and I think we should do it, put it in the toolbox. So I'm very much in favor of having that during budgeting and saying, let's add this mechanism, let's do it with an agenda bill, so that if we decide it's one we want to use next year, we can. So I see them as three sort of very different things.
So I'd have a hard time wanting to put that in right now without having further discussion. You're talking about money without having enough answers or information in my mind. I think there is a large TBD transportation conversation needs to be had, and we'll take some time, and probably, I don't know if we'll do it in one council meeting. And that could go on for a while, and that's fine. And I think we can add this to the budget in an amended way that we add many other things to the budget at any time we decide, the first quarter, second quarter, that we want to put it in there. We can put it in there at any time when we have more information. To put it in there now is just too soon without the information. So I'd have a hard time supporting it now. I'm not saying I don't support the project or the concept, but I don't see no reason to act now with lack of information when at any point in time, as we do our budget amendments, we can add that later. And I'd rather have additional discussions on transportation as a whole and what we're doing versus a single project.
Okay, so I guess the first question that we have is whether we are going to defer a decision on number 7, the debt funding source for Providence Point project, until after we have the opportunity to have a TBD discussion. And I'm not going to vote to delay it because I think we have, we've been talking about doing the project for years and years and years and years. And while I completely agree that having the transportation conversations are critical, but I also think it's past the point of critical, and I think we just have to get projects done. And so we're voting on funding for one particular project. We've already planned it. We plan to do it in 2019, and so I'm going to vote to not delay it. And then you can go around and say what you're going to do if you want, or we can vote up or down. It's up to you. Tola?
I'm going to vote to delay because I feel like the public still is very confused about funding. I mean, I'm confused about funding, and I've been on city council for 8 years. I think the public is super confused about funding for transportation, funding about other capital projects. I think we have to take the time to build that conversation with the public before. I'm confident that we can do that early in 2018, but I don't want to start into that. Even for a project that I consider very important, I think the delay of a month or 2 or 3 and allowing us to build that conversation with the public that we're going to have, particularly if we think about some sort of long-term funding mechanism, we got to restart that conversation with the public in a way that they can understand. And so I want to hold off on this one. That's why I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote.
The TBD discussion has been talked about in a couple different committees for, 6, 7, 8, 9 months? So I'm concerned that it wouldn't be 2 months. It would be a lot longer, but that's I understand.
Yeah, I'm going to vote to delay it, but that is not a vote at all about support or not for the project. It's because I believe, regardless of how we choose to fund it under the 2 options that we're considering, it'll have no impact on project execution. I just think one is a more comprehensive and potentially much better funding plan for more projects. There's really nothing, I don't have anything necessarily wrong against the one that we're considering. I don't feel that it's terrible. If it was our only option, but it's not. So I support the project. I think we have multiple ways to potentially fund it. One that's very clear that we can decide on. One is we have to go to the voters. But I think we can still do that and not affect the actual execution of the project either way how we fund it. And that's why I'm going to defer.
Yeah, just to clarify that, supporting the project, we have the money in the budget to do all the work in 2018 that we need to do to keep it on track. So I think we're already saying, I am saying, and I think the committee as a whole is saying that the council is, that we support this. We're moving ahead on the project. The only question is, how do we fund it? And it's not delaying the construction schedule at all to have a further conversation that's more in-depth and more accurate on that in the next first quarter of 18. So I want to make sure if it doesn't look like saying no here is against the project. We're already putting money towards the project.
So a year ago, we sat at this table after budget and said, hey, let's look at a funding proposal for Providence Point. And here we are a year later. We don't know how to fund it. We keep saying we're committed to it. To me, this is just taking $375,000 of general special or debt, however Jen figures it in, and marking it. So we're going to do the project. You have lots of time to talk. You're not locked into any particular funding mechanism at all. I actually think a year of trying to figure out how to fund it and not coming up with something doesn't look good on us, and I'm fine with putting it in now, reducing our budget by this amount, meaning we'll have, we're going to have to take something out to do this. And if we decide to fund with a different mechanism in a month, then we have more money than we thought. But I'm not all hung up on the how. We can figure it out. It was putting it in, it's in. I'm going to vote to move it forward into the budget so that it's there and we account for it. We'll figure out which funds it comes from after. The money, we can do this one way or another. Whether TBD gets done or not, we can do it. For me, this is a vote about funding it, not how to fund it. That to me is almost a reason, like we're trying to find a reason not to vote on this tonight, which I find a little discouraging.
Eileen?
I think we need to move this forward. I mean, it's been much longer than everybody has been indicating around this table, how long we've been looking at this particular project, and nothing has been moving forward. It's just, I think, time. And it's important to this particular roadway for those residents, and we need to move this on. And there is, as we've heard, there are the funding available, so I say yes.
So this is, I'm listening to what we're talking about in terms of a potential delay and talking about the TBD and that kind of thing. But I have to say that I think I see this very similarly to what Mary Lou talked about, is that this is saying we're going to move forward with this project. We have this funding method that we're talking about, but as we go forward with conversation, we have a way to tweak that or modify that or make changes. And I definitely, we've been talking about this for such a long time. We've talked about our support to move this forward. So I think moving forward on this now and saying this is what we intend to do, and then if as the conversation progresses, if we decide that we need to make a change with that, then we make a change. I'll be supporting this.
So the first question is, so the first question will be a thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up, thumbs. The proposed question is to delay a vote on this item until after the discussion in December, potentially about TBDs. So thumbs up is to delay. Okay? So I'll be voting thumbs down, just so to give you an indication, only because that's what I talked about. Okay? So we're going to vote on it tonight. That was 4-3. So then the question is whether to, we moved. Oh, wait, that's okay.
Sorry. Did I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then now the question is whether to add $375,000 in am I saying it right? Expenditures.
Yes.
From one of those funds to, as a debt funding source for the Providence Point project. Thumbs up means add it to the budget. Thumbs down means don't. Want to make comments, or do you want to vote? Ready to vote? Okay, I'm barely seeing head nods, so we're going to vote. Okay, 1, 2, 3, vote. 4, 3. Okay.
Councilmember Goodman, I just wanted to explain the mechanics of why there were 3 fund options. Essentially, what this would be is to transfer $375,000 from the general fund to the debt fund.
Okay.
That would be the accounting.
Okay, so number 2, policy question number 2 is, shall the city augment current services and add the following, including new costs? There's 2 senior services, lunch services and transportation services, and then a new after-school program at community center and Sunday operation of community services, which are both recreation. I think those are 4 separate items.
So I put up the pro formas. The first one that I have up is the pro forma on the new senior center programs. The expenses for the lunch program were identified at $62,000. The revenue associated with this new program was $18,720. And so there would be an impact to the general fund of $43,280 in increase in expenditures. For the senior center transportation program, total expenditures would be the $27,560 with an offsetting revenue of $10,000. Those were the 2 senior center.
Questions? So just on the senior center ones, Jen, one of the things I'm still having a hard time understanding is the total cost of the senior center. And I wrote it in an email question, but I don't think it's on our question sheet yet. In 2016, it was run by a nonprofit. In 2017, it was run by us. And in 2018, so far, we're proposing to also run it. And just understanding how what services we used to provide, or what services someone else used to provide, and they cost, and what we're doing. I don't have, right up front, I like both of these and I want to support both of them. I don't understand, I don't have any context around them. I'm not sure, I'm not sure of the big picture of what we do in the senior center, so it's hard to understand why just adding these 2. That makes sense. And I'm not sure if that's something Jeff can answer. Or...
He can. He's across the street at Parks Board at the moment, but I'll take a shot at it.
Sure.
The Volunteer Advisory Board discuss this question. In addition, we had our community needs assessment that we performed this year. We've had additional opportunities to gather input and feedback from senior center patrons. And these are two programs through that collection of information that seniors value and would like to see enhanced. And so it's our recommendation that we go ahead and do that, even as we are still in the transition to what that future state looks like.
So are these big deals? Like when I say I have no context, is this a lot of money to spend? Does this make our service way better? I can't see exactly, I guess, the big picture. It's hard to see what this does. And I don't know if I'm asking the question right, but I don't seem to have any context.
Sure. Well, perhaps if we can scroll to the lunch one. The lunch one is, I think, easy to understand. It's offering it more days of the week. So in terms of outcome, it provides an opportunity for that kind of reduced cost meal.
Oh, I understand. I actually like both of the additions. What I don't understand is if there was a nonprofit running it for $10 a senior service, and we started out with $169,000 one year and provided some services at something per senior. What does this do? Like,
Sure,
give me a
for
metric on how much, not just what the program does, but how much more are we investing in this center?
Sure. I believe the answer, let's take lunch as an example, is we have assumed the same costs that are in the current contract with the provider today, which was the same costs that were assumed by the operator in the past. Jeff and crew intend to go out for proposals and investigate if there are better options in terms of cost, but also quality. But for the time being, what we have assumed is the same costs as we have been experiencing and the other operator experienced.
So in terms of impact it might have, how many dollars per senior served, taxpayer dollars are we spending this year compared to last year? Like, is this a big jump, a little jump?
I can't answer that question.
That's sort of what I meant by context, just trying to understand.
Can you restate that one more time?
So taxpayer dollars
Per meal served.
Meal served, or per service. So it's obviously an improvement in service because we're providing more service. But I don't understand the impact of that in terms of real dollars of what does it cost the city to support the senior center, and what does this improvement do, tax dollar per person served, improve? Is this a big improvement, little improvement?
Sure. I just don't have those.
Would council want to do more than this?
I don't have those units right now. I don't know how many seniors, et cetera.
Okay.
So I think the question is what's the budget for the senior center? Really, I mean, because we don't know now, like I said, and where that package is, because we're adding $60,000 of expenses for these services for the two of them put together, and that's fine. Like I say, I support both programs as well, but when we were just giving to the nonprofit, it was just under $100,000 a year. I think we're spending a little more than that now, but I don't know what that is, and we're going to add $60,000 to it. Now, I also believe we're serving a whole lot more seniors now than we used to as well. So I guess just the big picture of what's our budget now for seniors center is at $150,000, then this would be $60,000. It'd be X increase kind of thing.
That expanded budget, when we broke out the park and rec divisions, separated the senior services, and so it was in a public agenda packet, and so I can pull that up.
Yeah, and I think that's the question.
We took over providing the entire service.
Right.
We're not just increasing our payment amount. We took over. So really, one of the questions is, how much do you want to subsidize? What?
I just want to point out that Jeff Watling came before Services and Safety in September with a report from the Senior Advisory Group, and these were the number 1 and 2 issues that they had for additional services. They had a lot of stuff that they would like, but these were absolutely the number 1 and 2 that came out of that group, and we've been generally very happy with the overall feedback we've gotten out of that group. So I trust that this is a legitimate recognized need out of the senior community around that center.
Jen, on the pro forma, the salary lines on both the transportation and the meals, I read that as net new salary. I mean, is this an additional staff? If this is increasing the hours of an existing staff, what is it?
New salary.
I'm sorry?
New salary.
New salary.
Yes.
So we're taking someone who's part-time and they're doing more?
One moment, please.
Okay.
We should probably say something just so people who are watching don't think that there's something wrong with the sound.
So there was a question earlier, just to break into the silence, I suppose. So on average, and you may have the total there, but we spent about $250,000, I think, on senior services. There it is, salary and benefits.
The 2017 amended budget was $208,200. Keep in mind, this is expenditures. The proposed 2018 budget is $335,860. So you can see the increase in some staffing, increase in operational costs, and no change for professional services.
With these items. Okay, so my question about salary was, so we're talking about a salaried employee, something, again, there's no new position being asked for here. We're taking,
Part-time work hours, and
I'm sorry?
there would be some part-time work hours involved with that, I believe, right?
Okay, so
That's correct. So that's what's shown on the performa. So you get an increment from those two performas for the increase in salaries and benefits. And Jen, correct me if I have this wrong. The other addition in salaries and benefits is we were in essence borrowing a position from Aquatics to staff it in 2017, and so now this reflects the costs of staffing the manager position through the senior center as opposed to utilizing an existing FTE from elsewhere and the salary that came with that.
So I knew there would be, so I knew that, thank you for clarifying it, and yet, so what I'm just trying to get at is that that's an additional salary. That's not just something more on the to-do list for the manager. It's actually some additional part-time.
Correct. I believe it does reflect on the performa those additional part-time hours just to make sure that we have the programmatic help to run it for additional day or additional trips.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Deliberate?
Sorry, to catch up, the columns there, because I didn't see them. It's the bottom. I know the bottom there, 208, 188, and 335. What, the 335 is the proposed 18 budget?
That's correct.
With these items in there?
That's correct.
With the 60,000 additional. So there's more in there than just that 60,000. Thank you.
That's what Emily had just talked about, how we borrow. Yeah, that's okay. Just want to make sure I close the loop. So there was the borrowed position from the pool that we used to kind of limp by this year. This would return that position to the pool, and we'd have that person for a period of time.
Mariah?
And sorry if I missed this, the transportation piece, could somebody just talk a little bit more about what that means? Providing more rides to doctor's offices or
So
just getting people to the center?
Page 48 has some explanation of that. So we, East Side Friends of Seniors, we've done some work with them. They do a lot of that with volunteers in terms of getting people to doctor's appointments and those types of things. But what we did here was that enhanced transportation to the senior center and back would be a
Okay.
benefit. And then there is some potential transportation service to local appointments, which could be done either on a contract basis or continuing to expand that partnership with East Side Friends of Seniors if they're able. They've been able, they have also had some challenges being able to meet all the appointment requests that they have with the volunteers that they have.
Thank you. Just missed that.
Deliberate comments? We're on, I'm going to speak to both the senior center ones. I'm going to support those additional expenditures. I think it's really important that we provide quality services to our senior community. I'm not excited at all that it's, I'm not going to say it that way. I look at this as right now not necessarily permanent, maybe interim until we make a decision next year about what that permanent structure will look like in terms of operating. I am not at all convinced that the city should be in this business of providing senior services, but it's clear to me that we need to provide more. That group that came together felt strongly about it, and I think we are providing, in my own opinion, I think we're providing somewhat of a minimum, and I want to provide more right now. But I'm looking forward to actually addressing what this permanent, what we're going to do permanently next year. Mariah?
So I would be supporting both of these issues, I think, in light of everything that we've sort of gone through over the last year and taking a look at and listening to the feedback that came to services and safety. These were the top two items, and I too would want to, I think it makes really good sense to expand in this direction.
Anybody else? Mary Lou?
So I actually agree with Tola. I watched the meeting where Jeff did his presentation, or I was at it, I don't know, one or the other. But I do remember it, and it was a good presentation, and definitely these are needed. I'm voting for them tonight, and I know that we are not entirely, as a city and a community, decided how to run this, but I guess I have one question for Jen. One of the reasons I have a hard time with context on this one is because obviously these are improvements. These are great, and I kind of agree with the council president. Probably we could and should do more. Under the former model, there was some component of grant funding or something else that came in, and even though I don't think the budget structure they had was particularly good, you could kind of see what programs were and maybe they're getting grant money. Do we have the opportunity to leverage grant dollars for this senior center so that the entire cost of running it isn't put on the taxpayers, even just in the interim?
I'd like to have Emily assist or Jeff assist with the grant potential for senior services.
Yeah, I would assume we have some opportunities for that, but I don't have exact information for you tonight.
That's fine. I think I understand there's improvements. I just don't understand how much of an improvement it is because I don't really understand what we do over there. I think one thing when we end this, whether it's a nonprofit that takes it or the city that keeps it, there just is this whole level of transparency that if I can't understand it, how can someone in the public? And so while I vote for this tonight, I'm also going to put in a strong, strong urge that we look for those grant opportunities because we're moving away from a model that had both to a model, even just for 1 year, that is completely taxpayer supported. And I'm just wondering if we can help with that somehow. But I'm in favor of what I see today. I think it's good.
Sure. The only thing that I would add to that is grantors usually look for what's the governance look like, what's the stability of the model look like. And so I think it will be a little challenging for the next year, but whether the city operates it long-term or we have a contractor operating it, once that decision has been made, I would expect that either entity would have opportunities to apply for grants and be successful.
Yeah, I'll be supporting this also as we get our senior center really back up and running and fully functional and having lots of participation. So it's important. But I do hope to this year get that to where we decide that long-term model. I just want to throw another side comment out there because this is supporting our seniors, which is very needed. And I also want to throw out a pitch for our youth because they are in dire need of things as well. And because I've heard some backlash on Teen Cafe and some of the other things that are happening, I think we need to keep that in mind when we support this. We need to support the other end of the spectrum just as much, if not more so at this current phase of time. So do this, let's get the long-term model set and go.
I just want to address one thing Councilmember Pauly was talking about, again, referring back to the presentation that was given to Services and Safety back in September. One of the cons associated with the city operating model was the perception that the city is not as well positioned to accept donations grants. So it sounds like that's an area that they're going to have to fill in with a little bit more information as we move forward before we make that, as you point out, super critical decision about whether that's. I couldn't agree more that it's very important to decide whether we're going to provide that critical service or whether we're going to hand it to a hopefully more thriving nonprofit. So I look forward to that conversation, but that is the perception, whether it's accurate or not.
Ready to vote? Okay, so this, the first vote, a thumbs up, would be voting to approve additional lunch services, $18,720. 2, 3, go. Okay, that passed unanimously. The second would be a thumbs up to, if you want to approve additional transportation services of $10,000. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay. The next two are recreation. The first is new after-school program at the community center, and the second is Sunday operation of community services, which includes the pool. It says community services right here in this one we have in our packet.
Council President, may I just point out the senior services, like I indicated, the revenue is connected to the expenditure. And so I want to do this thumbs up in both of those line items under the maintenance and operations, because we were at the revenue, so I just wanted to point that out for council.
So you need additional voting?
In my mind, we voted on the program, the revenue and the expenses.
Yes. Yes, I would say, okay.
Yep. Okay. Did
Yeah,
I say
all
the wrong
four line
number?
items are dependent on the two questions.
They are. It would be the same as you discussed this
Right.
new item.
Okay. Okay, the next two. Questions on the after-school program?
She had the pro formas for
Oh, yeah, pro forma's
those.
up. Okay.
So the Sunday operations are an additional expenditure of $40,000 with an offset of revenue to cover this new program. This is just, all I have is the Sunday operations. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Silence. Are there questions?
Can I ask a question while there's that? How come we haven't seen these two at services? The way we had some of the senior center stuff?
I think that's because the senior center conversation has been more lengthy and ongoing. And These were just recommendations from the department during the course of reviewing their operations and looking ahead, as we always do, to try to forecast what service demands are and propose ways to meet those.
Okay. It's always easier if we have a look at it committee
Sure.
first.
Understood.
So I just looked at both columns here, and it looks like both these are actual revenue generating, 2,000 for one and like 20 some odd thousand for the other one. So that's kind of,
Yes, it wouldn't be a windfall, though.
Parks Department has a windfall.
Other questions, Paul?
I'm looking at our package from back in October. Actually, there isn't, I don't have any information about the after-school programs.
Don't either. Never seen it.
Even in Jeff's, when his presentation, he's got turf replacement, senior center, or recreational facilities, which is on that spreadsheet, which is the second line, Sunday operation of the community center and the pool. But I don't have any information about the after-school program.
Did you see the bottom of 48?
Where is it? Which packet?
today.
Which packet? Today's?
The packet today.
Today's?
48.
Okay, that's okay. If that's where it is, thank you.
Second bullet point.
Today's packet.
Boy, is this the first time we're seeing it?
I'm going to read it because it's short. It's a new after-school program at the community center. With the transition of the neighboring school from a middle school to an elementary school, we propose, that is the Parks Department, adding a fee-based after-school program for elementary students to our programming at the community center. The additional expenses of $86,600 would be fully covered by 100% by new revenue from user fees. So it still doesn't say what the program is. I'm assuming it's parents paying for after-school.
Correct. What we have learned through conversations with the school district, for-profit providers in the community for childcare, talking to parents that have kids in our existing programs, there's a need. There's parents that can't find before and after school opportunities for their kids. So as Jeff explained, we feel that we're uniquely situated geographically to provide that and have facility available during those hours to service that need.
Tola?
So, having complained that it didn't come before services first, I love this. My oldest is a product of the middle school community center programs, and more than providing a place for her and all of her girlfriends to go that was safe, that they loved, it was also a feeder for the youth advisory board, which, in my particular case, got my daughter involved in a whole bunch of community stuff. So, beyond just a place to play after school. So, the idea of having, because the elementary now is directly adjacent and isn't, 3 or 4 blocks away, this seems like a great idea. And then the fact that it's revenue neutral makes it a total total no-brainer for me.
My question would be, there are programs at the grade school. Granted, it's been a really long time since my kids were in grade school. So is this in competition, or basically those programs are overloaded?
They're overloaded. I believe, if not all, most have wait lists.
Okay.
And significant wait lists.
Okay. Well, I would just also say that my kids, too, went to the community center during middle school, and these programs are, it's just great. Really close by, and they have the opportunity to meet great kids, and the programs are wonderful, so I would be in full support of this. Very important.
Yeah, I'm supporting this, but I have a couple definite questions. First of all, the references I'm hearing from other council members is middle school. The purpose of this one is very specifically to elementary school, because now that's an elementary school next to the community center, not a middle school, and that's why they're talking about this program. So I assume, again, before school, after school kind of care, like used to be up at Clark and so forth. And this is fine in doing this, but I do ask a question of, for sure, sometimes why we want to jump in and do it. There are definitely nonprofits that specialize in this. Just happen to know my daughter works for one, that they come in and actually set up in adjacent to a school and provide all these services and so forth as well. So it's fine that we're doing this. And it's needed, there's no doubt about that. Sometimes we jump in and say, oh, well, let's just run it. And other times we got to look and see, well, maybe there's some other groups that would just take that on for us and not even have to worry about that additional work. So that's just another option. But as far as providing more for the elementary level, particularly before and after care, is definitely critical.
Just one quick comment. I just wanted to say thanks to the Parks Department for, we're always trying to find ways to enhance service, and these are great ideas. They're great. So I'm in support of both of them.
Okay, you ready to vote on what's up there first? The after-school program?
After-school program.
What?
Notes are showing up.
No. Okay. So thumbs up is for the new program. 1, 2, 3, go. Sunday operation of community services. Can I vote for that? 1, 2, 3, go. Okay. Are we done? Just kidding. Okay, that was policy question number 2. Number 3, shall the city implement a new fee for online customer self-service applications and begin in 2018 by charging a tech fee for park and recreation programming?
So Jen, is the fee built into the current budget, or is this new?
It is built into the current budget.
And the fee would be for online customers, and what's it being collected for? Is it a tech fee, software fee? What's it for?
It's been identified as a tech fee to help offset the cost of providing those online portal for customer service and for conducting business.
And so in the current budget, is the tech fee and the cost for the recreational software neutral?
No.
Balance each other out. To what degree do they not balance each other out?
The proposed tech fee is $92,000, and the cost of the new software, year 1, is $136,000.
So which items are we looking at here? Not just number 16?
It is just the revenue item line 16 for the $92,000 for tech fee online customer service, self-service applications.
Right.
So on the application, when you're paying, when you're going in to pay, it's just added on to the bottom end. What is a typical fee? What is the
A typical fee?
Yes.
$2, $1?
Yes, it's just added in at the end of the transaction.
And then what is a typical fee, the tech fee amount? I'm sorry.
Some entities charge, they charge a flat dollar amount, whether it's $1 or $2. Some charge a percentage of the transaction.
Got it.
And so that ranges from, in a previous presentation, we had provided some examples of a percentage of the transaction, and this is proposing a 3%.
Thank you.
I think we should vote on whether or not to buy the software before we vote on whether or not to charge fees to use the software.
That's fine. Or?
I thought we already did vote on whether to get the software a while ago.
The software is included in the capital budget.
I thought there was a vote by this council, because there was a presentation, at least it came through committee. I don't know if it came to,
It did come through committee.
right, but the question is, did it come to full council? I thought it
I thought
did.
it did.
Well, if it's in the capital budget, then it was approved that way.
It was in the capital budget, and then it came to the council for the contract for the software provider.
Right.
Okay.
So it's not a line item in this budget?
Yes, it is a line item in this budget.
Yeah, the purchase of it or just the annual fee?
We generally, is it subscription or is it a license
Subscription.
with support?
It's like, there's a percentage of revenues that they take. It's different than the old model.
So that's the fee.
Yeah.
That's the expense,
It's
is
part
what
of-
we pay them.
It's part of the implementation fee, so part of that is the cost of the consultants, part of it is the actual annual cost of the new application software as a service.
Okay, so that's different. Consulting software as a service versus a license fee, those are two different things.
Bill?
I think they got a percentage of revenue.
No, it's just one small correction.
Thank you,
It
please.
is complicated. It has a piece of that. There's a base fee. That base fee is not a product of a percentage of our revenue until we hit a ceiling. And then at that point, then we jump up another increment in the annual cost. They have tiers of cost based on your revenue, but it's not directly tied dollar for dollar as a percentage to our revenue. That makes sense? Sort of, kind of. Paul?
So we early authorized entering into a contract for this service. And at that time, we did not authorize the payment of the fee for the service?
We have to incorporate in 2018 the increment that goes toward that annual charge.
Okay, I understand for
That's what's
budgetary reasons,
represented
that's
there.
why we have to have a line up there. So I apologize for not having recall on all of this. But in that bill that we approved the contract to buy the service, was this in there as well?
Let me research that, and then we can determine whether this needs to be deliberated or already has been.
Because this may be just a housekeeping, it's like, okay, now we have to actually appropriate the payment of the fee in the budget.
Yeah, let me look at the motion.
So want to save it for next time?
Please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can we ask, say what's missing though? Or say what we need? So it was a policy question. Shall the city implement a new fee for online customer self-service application and begin in 2018? And so if we do not approve the $92,000, we're going to have to pay that without having a revenue stream for it. I guess the questions that I have is, I don't remember much of this at all, but I do think whether it's a percentage of I'm curious to understand if ours is a percentage of the cost of the program or a flat rate per, and so I'd like to see that. And also, I'm not sure why we wouldn't go for more, why we would have the difference between the revenue line and the expenditure line further down. And I don't need an answer tonight, but I think I need a little more information before I can vote on those two.
Yeah, a little bit that I'll say tonight is we just looked at how these fees are set up in the marketplace, and knowing that our costs, our participants' costs can range from booking Pickering Barn for a wedding, a huge expense for some couples, families, to a small program fee for a single event, let's say. We wanted to find a number that seemed reasonable and would allow us to continue to have the participation across the economic spectrum that we want, plus continue to ensure that we have, for example, at our wedding venues, high booking rate.
So just a question, would 100% be the expense number below 180? Is that, did those two lines match up? So we're doing 92, but we...
The 92,000 is based on the Park and Rec revenues, and so that was the percentage of revenues that we take in, because this is 3%.
3%.
The cost in the capital projects for the first year of the software implementation is 136. So that's already had previous discussions by the council. So it essentially is the new revenue piece of it to help offset the costs of adding in these new software applications for customer service purposes.
So are applications online, is that optional? Can you still do it in person? Or is it required to be online
You can still pay in person.
without a fee?
Jen, do you recall if the fee was going to apply across all transactions or only online transactions?
I think it applied for all transactions because the use of the software essentially is going to help, it will administer programs and facility rentals. So even if someone walked into the community center and needed to register, it's my understanding that they would still go through the online portal. Perhaps customer service rep would help them set up their online account so they could utilize and sign up for more programs. So it was intended to cover all transactions.
Still being utilized?
That's correct.
Okay. Bill?
So that was my question.
Okay. All right, so we're going to defer that question to next time. That's the only line item, only line for that policy question, Jen? Yes. Okay.
The next policy question is number 4.
Shall the city dedicate new revenue from Central Park Pad 1 rental to the Park Capital Project Fund and reserve funds for turf replacement?
So I want to point out the line items here, the numbers that connect to this. This is the new identified revenue that we expect to take in from the turf field rentals. The offsetting expenditure then is the 140 that is in here. Right here. Turf replacement reserves, this would be a transfer out from the general fund to the Parks Capital Project Fund.
Comments on this? Sorry, questions?
Sure.
On the policy piece, I'm fairly confident that I like the 100%. I actually think if we have a fee-based program for a facility like that, yet it can be used by residents when it's open at no cost, I actually think the fee should pay 100%. Anyway, so I would propose increasing the park turf placement reserve to the schedule that Jeff presented in the Q&A this time to be at 100%, so that we have a revenue stream that pays for turf field replacement.
Bill?
And I have a question on the amount, looking back at this. So the revenue side showed $280,000 a year for rental. And for whatever reason, the proposal was half of that, 140.
That's correct.
If I remember right, the numbers were, to get that 100% was more like 200,000?
That's correct.
Correct. So there's, and I know Parks wants some of that money to put towards operations and maintenance and so forth. But if you moved it to the 200,000, you still have 80,000 that, you don't have to do the whole 280,000, but to pay it would be 200,000, then 80,000 could be left to turn back into operations and maintenance of the facility as well.
Yeah, I think, and you did bring that up earlier. I'm actually in support of whatever the administration says they require for operations and services. I'm in favor of higher fees. So if they say they need $140,000 because we have extra capacity, I'm fine with that. If they say we need $200,000, then I want a higher fee structure. So I'm trusting their number on operations.
There was one policy question that Jeff pointed out, and I think it's worth a little conversation here, and that's if we want full cost recovery, is the assumption that that cost recovery is also supporting the free drop-in use of the facility, and is that appropriate? Or does that put us in a position where we will be seeking to book that facility for as many hours as we possibly can in order to meet that fee recovery target at the expense of possibly not having opportunities for drop-in on that facility?
I guess my answer to that would be, it would assume the same number of hours of rental, but the field rental cost would be higher. So it would not preclude the private drop-in or the public drop-in piece. It would say if Marymore rents the field for $500, we rent it for $800. So it would be just in the amount of the fee charge, not necessarily taking away time from the drop-in. Not saying you have to rent it more to catch up. And I'm totally, a lot of this is guessing, but I agree with what Bill had said earlier, that the market is hot, and I end up playing soccer at 11 o'clock at night, so these fields are hardly ever available. So if it's a bad assumption, then there's always the opportunity to consider looking at a fee structure that doesn't get 100% cost recovery. But to start, I'd rather start with assuming we'll get 100 replacement.
I have a question about equity. Do we have any mechanism, I don't know if this is even a thing, but if there were an organization that wanted to rent it that for whom the fees are a hardship, do we have any mechanism to address that?
We have some scholarship dollars available for city programs. Those private entities make up their own rules. I think that's one of the considerations that we had, is certainly this fee is going to be passed on to the parents that sign up their children.
Okay, I just, as we think about, because I'm generally with you about full cost recovery, and fees are a good way to do that. I just want to make sure that if we have folks for whom that is a hardship, that we have some mechanism for it. And I would love to, at some point, it'd be fun next year after the dust settles, to get, to hear a little bit about that at services and hear how that program is doing, and whether the community takes full benefit and all that. It's certainly not a topic for right now.
Right. The only thing that I would say is we would have to get most of that information from the non-city users of the facility. Right now, we have programs that only occupy one season of use on those fields. The predominant use is by other entities.
Okay. I guess it's just, you mentioned a scholarship fund, and I just sort of wanted to know how much we actually dole out with that.
Sure.
And
yeah.
I'm saying that can just be sometime next year. I'd be curious.
Sure.
As a services topic, if I'm on services.
It's not clear to me how much of this, well, this is for all turf surfaces that we have, or is this just, and that number is how many? Yeah. Is it four?
The one at Central Park.
And what do we think Mary Lou just said 11 o'clock at night, is that 7 days a week? Or, how often are these not programmed in total? In other words, what is the window for free drop-in?
I don't have those statistics for you right now. And it's complicated, too, because oftentimes we have drop-in users that are playing on the margins of fields or end zones, or only one of the two fields might be a rental use at any particular moment in time. But we should be able to calculate at least how many hours of rental we've had.
Yeah, so, okay, I would like, it would be good to know that, because full cost recovery, and so we would be expanding the definition to actually fund a replacement program. I don't think we've done that with other cost recovery policy before. But when in fact if there is in fact significant open time, and then all the fee-based users are subsidizing all the open time. I just want a better sense of that. I don't know what it is.
So the way I would interpret it, if we move to 100% cost recovery, it would be closed during those hours that it's not rented. So it's like Tibbetts Manor or Pickering Barn. You don't get in unless you pay a fee, because it's 100% cost recovery. So if you had some use, general use, then it would be available for the public. If it's 10%, we'd book 10% of the hours that would be available for public use. So think of the pool as an example. We book some time for lap swimming, which is open to the public, come in, drop in. You have to be a member, but you can pay, you can essentially use a lap swim. But you can't go in there and swim when the swim team has got practice going on. So essentially the fields would be, you'd have to, if we went to 100% cost recovery, we'd say the fee is X, and if you're not paying a fee, you don't get access to the fields.
We could do that.
Well, correct. So that's the question that's out there, I think, right? Yeah.
I didn't hear that as what you proposed.
No.
But what I'm saying is, if you're saying you have to pay a fee to reserve the fields, right? And it would be closed during those times when they're not reserved.
I think what I heard was there's a mix of paid access and free access.
That's present, yes.
And that the pay access would fully subsidize not only the cost, including the set aside for replacement. That's what I heard.
How's that any different from when you're suggesting closing it off to no free use is what you're saying?
So right now, the fees don't cover 100%, the rental fees don't cover 100% of the cost. So it's available to the public. If anyone wants to drop in and use it when it's not being rented, they can. I think, as Emily said, there's sometimes the people who do rent the facility allow open spaces to be used by the general public, but that's at their determination. If they decide not to allow that use, they've got that right to kick them off the field during that time.
Wouldn't the idea be that the ones who are being charged the fees are the heavy users? You just aren't people casually out there kicking a ball. It doesn't seem like they're the real cause of the wear and tear. I don't know. So
I guess it's a reservation fee, right? So that's really what it boils down to. So the goal would be to try and reserve it as often as you possibly can, I guess. Now, we could build in some drop-in time if one chose. It's not as formal, I think, right now as then when it's available. But certainly that's an option too.
Bill?
Yeah, I think you brought up a whole different thing that hadn't been discussed here. And I guess my thought is that the amount of revenue that Jeff projected here included full rental time when it was available. They weren't turning away revenue saying, no, we have to keep the field open from 3 to 4 in case somebody drops by. I don't think that's happening. I think they're renting it out as as much as they can. So I'm assuming full use of that field from the rental aspect, and anytime it's not, anybody can use it. That's what I'm at, and what you just proposed is very much, school district kind of thing. The gate's closed, you can't use it because it's school property, kind of thing. And that's a different thing, and that's never been brought up here at all whatsoever. So I want to clarify that's not what's being proposed when we say just full recovery. The cost recovery is there by projection. It's just how much of it went back to operations and maintenance versus how much got set aside for replacement. Because the projection is $280,000, and the cost recovery is $200,000. So I don't think we're looking at replacement. so set aside 200,000 of the 280 for replacement. So we're not talking any more booking of the field time or so forth. And I think the big push on these fields at this level is for those that are using it formally for those kinds of things. That's why we're doing that. If we just wanted drop-in folks, we'd leave it the regular field out there. We wouldn't spend, millions of dollars to put in artificial fields for just drop-in casual use, I don't think. So I want to clarify that what the proposal you're talking about is not what Park Service is talking about.
So what I was talking about was like Tibbetts Manor. So if you want to use Tibbetts Manor, you can't just drop in and use it.
Right, but that's a building. It's not a park that's open that you can walk into in the public. That's different than, we're talking turf fields are out in the open. Anybody can, if nobody's using it, they can walk
So
across.
oftentimes during the day, it's available for public use right now. Anyone can drop in. The other option is to close it, right, and restrict access. And if you want to use the field, you got to pay a fee to use the fields. And so that's another model. Now, that may not be the best model, but if the goal is 100% cost recovery, we'd start with trying to rent it as often as we possibly can, because if you can get more rental usage, you don't have to charge as much of a fee. Right? So it keeps everybody's cost down. If you don't and you've got to just increase the fee, you can, but there are other alternatives. Now, there's great demand, obviously, for fields, but you still have Sammamish. You've got other areas that do offer field space that some of those users could choose to go to those facilities and pay to do that.
Right. I guess one of the other things I want to throw out, that just hasn't been mentioned yet, is at least a lot of the users of this, you mentioned it, are not city residents. I mean, we have a lot of local use, but a lot of outside use as well. So if we're not getting full recovery from them, then the city is subsidizing folks outside as well. So that's one of the other arguments for getting, set aside costs.
We'll live in Mariah, then Mary.
So, sounds like a great conversation for 2018. What we have in front of us is a suggestion that to either, this is not specifying new fees for Pad 1, right? This is, we have fees for Pad 1, right? We're not talking about increasing those fees, right? We're just talking about taking the money that we are bringing in. This is just a conversation about, do we want to take some money out of the general fund, because we're getting some in from Pad 1, and put it towards turf replacement, right? So, and I personally like the idea of 200 rather than 140. So this whole full cost recovery and all that, let's have that in 2018. We have a specific thing in front of us right now. Do we want to take $200,000 out of the general fund and put it towards turf replacement in 2018? I think that's a very good idea, or whether it's 140 or 200, and I suppose, like I said, I'd rather see 200. I would also like to point out that former Councilmember Scheer would very much like to be here today, because he argued for this from before I got on council through, I think, his last day on council. So if we move forward with this, somewhere out there his ears will be burning.
Right?
So I was just looking at the wording as well and what we're actually talking about. And so I would be in support of taking that money. And if we want to go higher than the 140,000, I would support that to go to 200. We're talking about looking into the future and actually having replacement for the turf fields, which is really important. I too think this is a longer conversation for us to have about cost recovery, and just keeping some things in mind. There are a lot of those kids that are part of those, and adults that are part of the programs where they're going onto the fields to play, but they're also playing out there, because they're practicing themselves kind of on the edges of the field and any time that there's open time. So I would very much hate to see that go away. I think it's really needed within the city. And then there are also a lot of big sports teams that may have more well put together programs where it would be probably a little bit easier to charge a higher dollar amount for those fees, and then some that are not as coordinated and well put together, that might be just a stopping point for them being able to access the field. So for all of those reasons, I think it's a longer conversation for later, but in regard to what we're talking about tonight, I would be in support of that.
Thanks. So I had a question, but we don't need to answer it tonight. The question is, obviously, we do not understand how the whole booking and charging of fields and replacing turf works, but we're just one city. I'm sure other cities do this as well, and the county does it, and they have to figure out how to set their fees and how much to rent it and whether or not to lock it up or not lock it up. So I agree with Tola, that whole piece can wait till next year when he's on services. But the question, I like the way Tola framed the question. What do we want to do this year? And so there's a line item in here for new revenue. There's a line item in here for starting a savings account to be able to pay for these fields. Is the number 200 or 140? And could go for a thumbs up on both those two line items tonight. I'm fine with that, recognizing that there is a much bigger conversation that needs to happen. I'm good with that.
What, Paul?
What's the revenue question?
Well, they put both up here, I think. Is there an ad for revenue, or is it just putting it away?
The amount in the
There it
proposed
is.
budget is for the turf rentals is the 280. It does not include a fee increase. I just wanted to point that out. And so this would be associated with the transfer out from the general fund that's currently proposed at 140,000. So they do go hand in hand.
So the new revenue, is that for the new turf fields that are going now? Which is looking super fantastic, by the way.
Yes, could you repeat that? What did you say?
It's for the 280 is for the new revenue from the new turf field that are being constructed right now.
Or isn't that for all turf fields?
Is it for all or just the new? This doesn't, I thought it said new.
I thought it should be for all turf fields.
It's new.
New. Additional fees from turf field rentals.
It doesn't say.
Doesn't say new.
I thought when Jeff was doing his presentation, I thought he talked about the other fields as well.
I thought that the
Actually,
the additional
interesting,
fees were attributed to the new turf field.
That's correct. If not wholly that number, it's almost wholly that number is from the new field.
So what happens with the fees from the existing field?
This is the incremental change to the budget. So what we are proposing is that we add in revenue 280 because we now have a new field to rent out.
So we're not adding any new revenue from the existing field rentals?
I can't answer that question right now. If there's a piece of that 280 that's based on assuming few additional hours of rental on the existing field. That's why I'm saying the bulk of that, if not the whole, is from the new field.
I think the question is whether, the proposal is whether we want to increase the 140 to 200.
Yeah, policy question first is, shall we siphon off some of that money and create the savings account you talked of? And then the second is, how much of it?
Okay.
And just, that number is planned to replacement on both these fields, the current one and the new one. So it's looking at both of those. I remember reading that here.
Mariah?
So not to completely confuse the whole issue, but I just want to ask this question to be clear, because we have talked a lot about needs for new turf fields, and this is only for replacement fields, correct? Okay.
Policy question specifically talks about revenue from Central Park Pad 1. Do we really want that question that narrow?
No. I think here we have an opportunity, we have a new opportunity because we have this new revenue. But you're correct in assuming the revenue could be generated from any of the fields and would therefore be put in the savings account for replacement.
But what you said was you think the vast majority of that is new revenue from Pad 1, which is why the policy question ended up that way. Right.
So I just asked the question, and I'm going to bring this up again. So I guess the question is, do we want to narrowly define this, this money as turf field replacement or just turf field. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
I might suggest we have a park strategic plan that is coming before you sometime soon, and there will be lots of opportunities in the future to talk about how to meet new need and what revenue sources might be applied to those. So you don't have to make that decision in totality this evening.
I understand the question to be just about replacement.
Okay, so unless there's any objection, I'm going to call. Oh.
Are you going to, okay, so the question, are we going to vote on the line item or the policy question?
So the first question is whether we want to start policy. The policy question about whether we want to start.
Set aside for turf replacement.
Saving money for turf replacement.
Okay.
And the second is how much in this budget?
Okay, so let's just be, and Emily answered my question earlier. The way the policy question is asked, it identifies revenues from PAD 1 only, and I would suggest that we, revenue from Central
Turf
Park
field
rentals, yes.
Okay. Everybody understand the first question? It's the set aside.
Wait, sorry. I just want to point out, in that language, we just want to make sure that whether we go with 140 or 200, that would be sufficient for the prorating of PAD 1 replacement. That doesn't address the other turf fields that we have in the city, right? So that's a conversation.
Addresses all.
Does it? I thought, oh, that covered, that's the prorating of all the turf fields in the city?
Get all the
Oh,
four
okay,
fields
good.
in there.
All right. Oh, I thought it was more than that. Okay.
Replacement of four.
So the first question is whether to start siphoning off money. That's not a good term. It's an accounting term. Siphon off and hide. We like those.
Great.
Okay?
Wait. Because I got to clarify that, because I'm reading back in here and it says, because it talks only about turf replacement for PAD 3 in 2020 and PAD 1 in 2030. So it's not talking about anything else in the city except those two pads.
How many do we have?
Those are the only,
Those are the only two.
city-owned facilities that are artificial turf. The one that's at Dodd Field is owned by the Little League in an arrangement with the school district.
All right, that's what.
But those are the only artificial turf
That's what I
fields
just
we
want to
have.
make sure. So it's those two, and that's what we have two, and that's what I'm.
Four.
Right.
Okay, so the question is, shall the city dedicate new revenue from turf rentals to the Park Capital Project Fund and reserve funds for turf replacement? Thumbs up means yes. Okay? So then the next question is what that amount should be. By head nods, do you want to start with the vote of 200,000? I would propose we start with that vote. Paul, you have a comment?
Just racking my brain to make sure I understand the information that we have and
Okay.
if that's actually,
I suggested that starting with that only because it appeared to have a majority support, and we don't have to start there.
so do all my colleagues on the council read that answer in today's packet and have full confidence that this $200,000 a year is for both fields? The table below, he mentions pad. Okay,
Possible to pull up that table, Jen, so we can show it to the public?
the total for the would be with 13 years coming, sorry. The four fields at the same time. Yeah, this is it right here. It's the 140. So pad 3 and pad unnumbered.
Yeah. The way I read the table is $780,000 short and $60,000 more a year for 13 years is 60 times 13, 780,000. So I read it as that would fully fund that. I just did the math in my head.
And it's
there.
both pads.
And both pads. That's what the math says.
So, yeah, when I vote on that, it's my understanding that this is replacement for both pads. I just wanted to make absolute clarity on that.
Thanks, Jen.
Just because I feel compelled to do it. I think this is current year cost, right? I'm not seeing an inflation factor,
No,
so.
that was my thought, too.
Yes, so
Assuming he built that in there,
No.
I wouldn't.
knowing it's going to be spent 13 years from now, you think you would.
Or we're going to be a whole lot
But I think he
closer
points out there's a lot of variables, so we have plenty of opportunities to come back and talk to you about adjustments to the fee and
Right.
what the costs are running and what our rental percentages look like. So I'm not terribly concerned, but it's more of intent, and we can adjust the budget each year if we want.
A lot of variables, including materials, and that in 13 or 15 years, who knows what those are going to be. But it's going to get a whole lot closer to replacement cost than we ever been. What's next? Mariah?
And just in reading through the November 27th update, if we go with the $200,000 per year, that would not affect the drop-in. The drop-in would remain the same. Wouldn't impact that.
Yeah, I think, so if you're just talking about the allocation of that money that's coming in, and you say 200,000 would pay for that, that's totally fine. It's when you start to talk about the 100% of the cost of replacement should be borne by the renters, then there needs to be some benefit to the renters, right? Which is exclusive use or some other, and it would be driven by that. If you're just saying we're going to generate X amount of revenue and it should be distributed in that way, I'm not worried about that other piece.
Okay.
You're totally fine.
And Bob, for your benefit, so Jeff used the word recover replacement costs in his write-up, so maybe that's why you're suggesting that. So thank you for your question. That would be one. I have two points. One would be I'm assuming that it's not scheduled 24/7. And that there still are times for unstructured drop-in. I don't know how much that would be or when it would be. I also know that there was concern on the council and from members of the public when we approved this that with the approval, with the lighting, that we're just going to be inviting more traffic into Issaquah, regional traffic into Issaquah, more of a burden on our infrastructure within a residential community where this park is located. And I would have a concern that that the economics of what we're trying to do here would actually force more regional use, more days, longer hours, which I think is counter to some of what we wanted. So that's just a concern.
Yep. I agree. My concern. So are you?
Well,
Totally.
and my thoughts are gelling here, but Emily said something a moment ago and said, no, we are not going to rehash it just because Jeff can't hear. Emily said something. We have opportunities to refine this in terms of what we think the right fee structure, replacement costs, and that schedule, and trying to get a balance between meeting the programmatic goals that we had, meeting the need within our own community and somewhat in the larger regional community as well, and yet also meeting the needs of the people that live within the vicinity, what it means to that neighborhood.
Yep.
So I'm weighing all of those in my vote on this.
Yeah, and that was part of the community feedback when they had the community meetings up there about limiting some of the programs. So just because you have lights on doesn't mean you can necessarily go till midnight. Just a lot of, there was a lot of discussion and feedback about making sure that it didn't just become a huge magnet, traffic, all of that. It's all the things you're talking about, for different reasons, too. Yeah. So, are you ready for this question? This question would be to thumbs up for the item turf replacement reserves, but instead of 140, it would be 200. For that?
We're voting on 200.
200. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, unanimous. Okay, so we're at 9:28. So we're out of time for tonight, with the exception of one more minute. Do we want to decide when the next meeting is?
Yeah, so everyone could attend Saturday, so if we want to do a Saturday morning from, I think it was 9 to 12 a.m., was that correct?
No, not everybody could do Saturday.
Yeah,
There's still some missing on Saturday.
So there's December 2nd, Mariah and Bill are not available.
Okay.
Monday, the 11th, we talked about a budget session, but that, we've also talked about, would be a TBD discussion. So if we had TBD, I can't imagine we'd be done with the budget. So,
So I just want to say, what's your deadline? December 19th?
The 18th,
So I lose my finance director December 18th for a short period of time.
December 19th at, I think, 6 a.m.
Okay. So
so what we could do is start on the 11th and then carry on into Wednesday, the 13th.
okay.
Yep.
Yes, so we have a council work session Monday, December 11th. There will be 2 topics. The first one will be I believe it'll be TBD, and then whatever time left, we'll work on the budget. And then whatever is left, we will meet 2 nights later, this 13th. Start at 6:30. We will be done at 9:30. And we totally can't be there on at that one.
And start time on the 11th was 6:30 also?
All right? Anything else from us? Anything else? No, not the 2nd. The 11th and the 13th.
At 6:30.
Yes. Is that right? Do you have something else, Bob?
I was just going to say, if you look at the deliberations list and you want any more staff to come to either of those 2 meetings, if you could let me know. Today we had a couple that came in just based on the estimate of items, but if there's any more or less, depending on what you see on the list, let me know so we can help them plan their evenings here in December too.
Okay. And I know that I will do a better job of making sure that I'm going to go through this list and try to make myself as informed as I can for our next session and a half-end session to try to make this, because we need to be done on the 13th. Really try to be done on the 13th. Okay, we're adjourned.